Hello, very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with me, Anna Jones. Here's how things are looking. One of the world's most wanted men, alleged crime boss Daniel Kinahan, is charged in Dublin after being extradited from Dubai. Andy Burnham's summer roadshow begins this week, hearing from those across the country about their cost of living concerns. A British couple jailed in Iran accused of spying end their hunger strike after nearly 3 months. Also today, we'll see what's making the headlines in today's papers with political correspondent at The Independent, Millie Cook. Plus, Bentleys and BMWs are amongst the supercars seized in a crackdown on antisocial driving. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us. Our top story today, one of the world's most wanted men, suspected crime boss Daniel Kinahan, is this morning behind bars in Dublin after being extradited from Dubai. The 49-year-old built a boxing empire while in exile, but now faces trial, charged with directing organised crime. Well, the Kinahan cartel is accused of importing tons of drugs and firearms around the world and has been linked to more than a dozen gangland murders. Our Ireland correspondent, Stephen Murphy, has the latest.
Touchdown for Ireland's most wanted man. A government jet brings the alleged crime boss Daniel Kinahan back to Dublin after his battle against extradition from Dubai failed. It's his first visit home for a decade. In an intense security operation, the 49-year-old was taken to the non-jury special criminal court. In a brief hearing, he was charged with directing the activities of an organised crime group. Kinahan's return being hailed as a significant day for Irish law enforcement.
I want to pay very strong tribute to An Garda Síochána, to the Garda Commissioner, in terms of the Gardaí's success in tackling organised crime in a very effective way. And also I pay tribute to the authorities in the United Arab Emirates for the strong cooperation with Ireland over recent years.
A boxing weigh-in at a Dublin hotel 10 years ago changed everything. A hit squad, some disguised as armed police, attacked the event with assault rifles, hunting for Daniel Kinahan. He escaped, but one of his associates, David Byrne, was shot dead.
It was the worst criminal outrage in criminal history in Ireland. People going around with Kalashnikovs trying to kill rival gang members in the middle of the day and trying to evade justice. That was never seen at that level before.
The hotel attack accelerated a feud with the rival Hutch gang, which left 18 people dead and paralysed parts of inner-city Dublin with fear.
It's very much like out of a horror movie, because it was frightening. There was armed guards on every street corner searching cars, and it was all about who was going to be shot next.
In the aftermath, Kinahan and some of his associates fled abroad, settling in Dubai. Irish police allege that while there, Kinahan continued to direct organised crime. 4 years ago, US authorities travelled to Dublin to offer a $5 million bounty on top Kinahans, including Daniel. They described the gang as one of the most dangerous in the world. Behind the scenes, there was intense work by Irish police and politicians securing a new extradition deal with the UAE. Kinahan's days in the Gulf were now numbered. Daniel Kinahan has now been remanded in custody, thought to be at Ireland's only maximum security prison in Portlaoise. He knows his legal battle will be tough. "I think we know I won't get bail, but thanks for explaining," he told the court. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
New Prime Minister Andy Burnham's summer cost of living road trip begins this week as he asks those across the country how the government can better their lives. It'll apparently include a crackdown on so-called subscription traps to help against rising bills. So let's bring in Rob, who's here. Morning, Rob. So what is this tour all about then?
So it's being billed as a tour hooked to cost of living, a tour where he'll promise basically everyday fixes is how they're describing it, but also a way for Andy Burnham to kind of gather information about what's affecting the lives of shop owners, of business owners, of regular workers, to inform his 10-year plan that he'll lay out later this year, which is the sort of really big chunky stuff, the kind of overhauling of the economic and social established state that we've had for the last 40 years. The first policy announcements that we're getting on this today, though, they're important, but in pure policy terms, they're not exactly big stuff. The first one is about some of the subscription traps you can get roped into, where you sign up for a discounted subscription and then it renews at twice the price and you can't get through to anyone on the phone to cancel it.
Oh, you may not even notice.
Yeah, exactly. It's not new stuff, though. This was coming in anyway. What's new is that it's being brought forward from when it is coming into implementation. Initially, it was going to come in spring 2027. Now it's coming in January 2027, which is why I say, in pure policy terms, it's pretty incremental. It's not huge. And then there is a consultation to change basically how easy it is to crack down on shops using kind of pretend prices, where they say it's discounted to 10 quid, but it had been 10 quid before anyway. So again, it's not massive. It feels to me that it's Downing Street sort of looking for policies that can be tweaked, changed, brought forward, and then announced again in the vein of the broader message around cost of living that he is trying to put forward. So it's very political. Policy terms, though, it's not going to be the answer to the question of how do you solve the cost of living crisis, put it that way. But
might he achieve a kind of feel-good factor and a positivity as he builds up to the budget where those bigger decisions might be made? That's what all of this is about, I think. It's the sort of vibes section of the Burnham Premiership still. I think that's what these policies are designed to feed into, and that's sort of what, in part, this summer tour is about as well. That's not to diminish the value of a Prime Minister getting out of Number 10 or getting out of his constituency and getting around the country to sort of get a handle on how important, I guess, people are feeling certain big issues. But equally, Number 10 has all the access to the kind of polling and focus groups it could want. So Prime Ministers don't need to kind of go out to find out what's afflicting people, he wants to be seen to be listening, doesn't he?
But he wants to be seen. I think there is a value in doing it full stop, but there is also certainly a value in being seen to be listening, especially when you're quite good at it, as Andy Burnham is. He's quite good at sort of being out and about and interacting with people, and he's got quite a slick social media operation around him. No doubt we will see a lot more of the videos that we've got used to over the coming weeks as well. So it is very much part of this first phase of Andy Burnham's premiership, I think, which is sort of setting out the stall, setting an optimistic note and setting his priorities at the very, very relatable stuff like, and this is why I think policies like this, work, even if they're quite minor in pure terms. They're easily understandable. Everyone has probably taken out one of these subscription policies and then found them renewing. So it's smart politics in that sense. But I think at some point, we will want to hear a little bit more if he is going to be overhauling the last 40 years of economic orthodoxy, because he ain't doing it through this. And I think it probably is the budget that is the crunch moment where everything gets a lot more real.
Yeah, OK, Rob, thanks very much indeed. Well, Andy Burnham will also use that tour to focus on reviving high street retailers. But if he's going to be successful, he'll have to battle long-term shopping trends and some of the economic policies of his predecessor. Our correspondent Charlotte Leeming reports from Wakefield.
Back in the 1980s, Wakefield's High Street was booming with the opening of the Riding's shopping centre, the Jewel in the Crown. Described as the next Harrods, people flocked here to spend their money. But times have changed. Many shops have now shut or moved out of town. The precinct's been slated for future closure and possible demolition for redevelopment. But new Prime Minister Andy Burnham says he wants to bring back hope to the high street and tackle the cost of living. Going on tour to meet people and hear their problems. So are they as hopeful as he is?
It's a real struggle. Me and my wife work, and we work 40 hours a week, and you're still struggling to pay your bills then. So, yeah, I think people that are on minimum wage and things are really finding it really difficult.
Put more things on to try and, revamp this area a bit and, you put more focus on some of the historic buildings, because some area of Wakefield are really nice. We just kind of get drowned out by a lot of the other not-so-nice buildings.
They're on about pulling Ridings down. There's all them shops in there. Where are they going to go? Pulling the flats down at the back of it? No, it's not good enough, is it?
Sofa store manager Mark Watson says high streets up and down the country desperately need support to survive, particularly with the rise in business costs and a reduction in footfall.
Like I say, the high street isn't dead. It just needs sort of rejuvenating, and obviously they're talking about redeveloping the ridings, perhaps pulling it down. That isn't the answer. For us, we know some of the larger retailers are coming out of the ridings, which will leave obviously some of your smaller independents sort of in limbo without the attraction of the bigger units to pull people in here. So what's going to happen?
Andy Burnham has said it's his mission to help ease the financial pressure on people. He's already set out measures to cap bus fares and to reduce the cost of energy. But the Conservatives are asking him to explain in detail how he actually plans to fund all of these initiatives.
Lovely to meet you. Nice to meet you.
The PM's heading out for community conversations. But it's his actions, not words, he's going to be judged on. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Wakefield.
In developing news this morning, Sky News has learned that the financially stricken Thames Water handed a £1 million sign-on fee to its finance chief, despite teetering on the brink of collapse. The seven-figure payment was made last month to Steve Buck, who joined the company in April last year. The money is understood to have been drawn from an emergency borrowing facility. The Ministry of Defence says no sensitive data has been compromised after it was revealed that cameras on Royal Navy drones were connected to a system in China. Cameras on the Navy's K3 Scout surveillance drone were found to be sending so-called heartbeat communications to a device in China. The Ministry of Defence said the transmissions had been found during a routine assessment, but said no data had been compromised. Now, a British couple jailed in Iran after being accused of spying have ended their hunger strike after nearly 3 months. Craig and Lindsay Foreman were arrested in January last year while passing through Iran on a motorcycle journey from Europe to Australia. They were sentenced to 10 years in prison and both adamantly deny the spying charges against them. So let's bring in Anjum Pirbakos on this. Morning to you, Anjum. Morning. So they had gone on a hunger strike. Tell us a little bit about what we know of how that was for them and why they've decided to stop now.
So the hunger strike was kind of sparked by a protest that took place within the prison, and it's in solidarity with the other prisoners in Tehran in that particular prison as well. So it's not just about their own need to be able to protest, but they're actually protesting on behalf of the other prisoners in that prison in Iran. And what we've seen is that they've been supported in this last 5 days of their hunger strike by people around the world, including their son, who's also in solidarity been part of this hunger strike. And they have decided to end it at this point. But I think it's really sending a strong message to their supporters, and the fact that they're doing it in solidarity with other prisoners who are in Tehran. Obviously, they've been charged and sentenced for 10 years, but we know that lots of campaigners are seeking for their release, including their son, Joe Bennett, who's met with their MP, Tony Vaughan KC, alongside the new Minister for the Middle East, Steve Doherty. And Joe Bennett, the son, has said that the conversations that they've had so far have been very positive and have been very constructive. But the hunger strike does not mean that because it's ended that they're going to end their seeking for justice and their release. They're going to continue that fight and that campaign. And they're hoping that the conversations that they've had with the ministers will prove to be constructive and productive going forward with some really affirmative action, because they're going to carry on campaigning until they see their parents come home.
Yeah, and we're actually talking to Joe Bennett a little later in the programme as well, so we'll hear from him how his hunger strike was and how much he's heard about his parents' condition at the moment as well. Thanks very much indeed, Andrew. Now, more than £8 million worth of vehicles have been seized by the Metropolitan Police in a crackdown on supercars in central London. 90 cars were impounded over the weekend in an operation targeting uninsured, antisocial and dangerous drivers. So it included Bentleys, BMWs, Lamborghinis, as well as an uninsured Ferrari worth £3.7 million. It's the highest number and value of cars seized in the operation's 5-year history.
So this time of the year we have an influx of foreign registered vehicles. Where their countries are too hot, they come to London for, a month, 2 months at a time, and they bring their what we class as supercars with them. whilst we like them to come to London, some of them do cause issues with their driving, the revving of the engines, the speeding, the popping of the engines, and generally just cause a nuisance to members of the public that are trying to enjoy central London.
Now, for some of the morning's other main stories, and Houthi rebels have released footage appearing to show missiles and drones being launched towards Saudi targets on the Red Sea coast of Yemen. At least 7 people were killed and 16 injured in the attack, which the Houthis claim was aimed at military forces and warehouses. The Iranian-backed group also say they attacked an oil facility in Saudi Arabia. A woman and a baby have been killed in a boat accident near the Statue of Liberty in New York. 12 more people were rescued in the incident on Saturday night. The operator of a boat has been charged with reckless endangerment. A Roman shipwreck has been discovered around 3 miles off the coast of Sicily. Italy's heritage police say they explored the vessel with the help of scuba divers and underwater cameras, finding hundreds of items which may have been used to transport wine, olive oil and fish sauce. And the blockbuster film The Odyssey has become director Christopher Nolan's highest-grossing film, passing $1.1 billion at the box office. The film follows Matt Damon as Odysseus on his 10-year journey home from the Trojan War. Now, the unprecedented heat waves we're experiencing could lead to soaring food prices, according to farmers. Heat spells are having a devastating impact on crops, and months of drought will destroy any prospect of a good quality harvest. Well, Sky's Ashish Joshi sent this from a farm in West Sussex.
Franz de Boer is pretty resilient. Farmers need to be. But a 5th heat wave is unprecedented, and it follows the driest July on record.
I mean, we've had no useful rainfall since the beginning of June, so it's no wonder there's no grass growth at all, and that's really unusual for us. But it's becoming the norm now.
This field should have good grazing grass, but it's scorched. He's not buying any more lambs, as it's expensive to feed them. For us, it could mean less lamb on the market at higher prices.
I mean, this should be about 7 foot tall, should have nice big juicy cobs on it, but as you can see, it's quite dehydrated.
His maize is wilting in the field.
Very low grain count, and you know, the whole thing is starting to dehydrate with lack of water, so it's a real concern.
And it's the same across the sector.
Livestock farmers are struggling. They've got no grass to feed their cows, so they're starting to feed their winter feed, which is not a good time of year to be doing that when they should be grazing the grass. But if you look at the national situation and then the situation across Europe, put that all together and it's a recipe for, again, inflation on food.
Large swathes of the country are already in drought, and it might be the whole country soon, with little rain in sight. The problem is it's not just British farmers who are feeling the impact of this extreme heat. Farmers across Europe are feeling the effects of it too. Add to that the uncertainties surrounding the geopolitical picture with the wars that are taking place across the world. It all means that there is just so much uncertainty which will be passed on to consumers, with food insecurity and prices invariably rising. That's something experts say is no doubt coming down the line.
I'm not concerned we'll run out of food anytime soon. What is more concerning is the price of foods. So when we have any kind of climate-related yield shock, or any yield shock per se, then prices usually go up, so food will be more expensive. At the moment, we have fairly high yield shocks, up to even 20%.
Temperatures are rising faster across the European continent than anywhere else in the world. And here in the UK, the next few weeks will continue to be hot and dry, meaning even more uncertainty for Franz and farmers like him. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in West Sussex.
Coming out next, we'll have more on the impact of those heat waves. I'll be speaking to a climate scientist coming up after the break.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
So, I'm sorry to say we are bracing for the 5th heatwave of the year this week, while the UK has already broken the record for the number of days where temperatures reached 30 degrees or above. At the same time, wildfires have been raging across Europe and North America. So, what's going on? Let's talk to climate scientist Ella Gilbert, who's here with me. With just that question, what is going on, Ella? 5 heat waves in one summer. Give us a sense, first of all, of just how unusual that is.
So the Met Office usually estimates we get between 4 and 10 heat waves a year. But what's really unusual about this particular year is the length and severity of the heat waves that we've seen. It feels like it's been one permanent heat wave. I don't know about you, but it's been unusual to have a cooler day, actually, than one of these hot days. We've seen, I think it's 35 days now, where we've had somewhere in the UK hitting 30 degrees Celsius or above. And that's broken the record from 1995, which was the last time it was set. So this is something that we're not usually seeing, and we can detect the fingerprint of climate change in specific events. So that one we saw across Europe in June, that was especially humid and especially uncomfortable for all of us. That one was made 80 times more, the temperatures were made 80 times more likely by climate heating. So climate change is making these sorts of events, these heat waves, these wildfires, these droughts, more likely, and it's making them more severe.
Well, yes, and we're told that they're more severe and more frequent as a result of climate change. So that's obviously a pattern we're going to have to expect in future. So does that mean we're going to get next summer like this? I mean, are we going to get every summer like this from here on in?
It's not necessarily like we're guaranteed to see it every single year, but the likelihood of seeing these sorts of events is increasing. And every single year, we're continuing to heat our climate, which means that we're continuing to increase the likelihood of these sorts of events and making them more severe. We know that, we saw that 40 degrees Celsius for the first time in 2022, which previously would have been inconceivable. We're likely to see that more often in future. Not every year, but going to become something that we see regularly. And also we're likely to see more kind of extreme weather, extreme heat waves, extreme wildfires. El Nino is about to kick in really in a serious way. So I imagine that 2027 is going to be hotter.
And obviously we've been warned by climate scientists about rising temperatures, but are they rising faster than they'd predicted?
Yes and no. We are now seeing an acceleration of temperature rise, and that's been shown in the scientific literature now. Some people are it's been a kind of range of predictions, but we are starting to see things happening faster than we expected, and we are starting to see the impacts of climate change being felt more keenly, and we're starting to see much more extreme events. And I mean, it's certainly faster than lots of people have predicted, yes.
And clearly there's the question of mitigation against those rising temperatures. What can be done to reduce the chances of them through climate change? But there's also the question of adaptation as well, because if hotter temperatures are here to stay, we need to learn how to live with them. To what extent are we focused on that and making the right moves?
I mean, it's yes and, right? We need both the mitigation, we need to reduce emissions so that we can limit the damage that gets done, but at the same time, we are committed to some degree of change, and we are going to see more of this extreme weather. We're going to see more of these heat waves, which means we do need to change the way we do things. I mean, nobody has air conditioning. Nobody really necessarily has the right architecture in their homes to be able to keep cool. We don't necessarily always have great green spaces in cities, which help with reducing the local temperature. So all of these measures, as well as the kind of changes that we can make at a community level, need to be done at the same time as we're reducing emissions, because it's a yes-and situation, and there's only so much we can actually adapt.
And what about wildfires? We've talked a lot about wildfires in the last few weeks. Terrifying for so many people caught up in them, both in Europe and in this country as well. Is there much that could be done to make them less likely?
Again, it's a yes and. Of course, it's reducing the impact of climate heating, but it's also about how we manage the land. So in France, for example, in that big heat wave and wildfire that we saw, a lot of the fires were tearing through very dense plantation woodland, which meant that they could spread more quickly. But of course, it's also the fire weather, which is when it's really dry, it's really hot, and there's a strong wind. We also saw that with LA last year. So when there's really hot, dry conditions and a big wind, it spreads really, really rapidly. And that's the kind of weather that we're seeing happening more often because of climate heating. So it's a really complex interplay of both kind of human actions and land management and things like that, as well as the added threat multiplier of climate heating.
And what do you make about the debate around net zero at the moment? Because clearly you were talking about the push, lots of climate scientists would back to bring down emissions, to sort of reduce the chances of heating continuing to go up exponentially. But there is real concern, isn't there, about what cost that might mean for individuals at a time when people are really stretched. What do you make of that political debate that's going on about the timing of reaching net zero and what impact it might have on people?
Well, net zero has become a bit of a dirty word. And the science is very clear. We need to actively and dramatically reduce emissions if we want to have a livable planet. The costs of climate heating are going to be vastly, vastly larger than the costs of acting to prevent climate heating. So the more we can do now, the cheaper it will be in the long run. And of course, we have to make sure that people are able to afford their bills, are able to afford to heat their homes, to cool their homes increasingly. But it's trying to make those changes that benefit most of us whilst not allowing the climate to kind of run away into this extreme state that we're seeing it develop into.
Ella Gilbert, really interested to get your take on it. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for joining us. Let's take a close look then at what today's weather looks like.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, it's going to be hotter this week, although cooler today, with heatwave conditions returning. So the morning looks quite sunny and dry for most, but northern Scotland will see a few coastal showers, mainly in the breezy northeast. Temperatures will be near average in the north, significantly higher in the south, but it won't be quite as hot as yesterday. So the afternoon will bring little change, although the far southeast may catch an isolated shower, and it'll stay mainly dry and clear overnight, although cloudier over northern Scotland and southwest Ireland.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Time now to speak to the government. I'm joined by the Business and Health Minister, Chris McDonald. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us today. So Andy Burnham is due to set off on his tour of the country this week. Opposition parties, I notice, are calling it a vanity tour, offering only tinkering. Do they have a point?
Morning, Anna. Thanks for inviting me on. Well, I think what we're talking about this morning is something that's going to be of real interest to Sky News viewers, and something that will hopefully affect the pound in their pocket as well. So as part of Andy's tour around the country, he's of course listening to people as well, but at the same time we're announcing some real measures that will help people too. So this morning we're talking about new measures that will help people not be trapped in subscriptions that they don't want, you know, those services sometimes that you sign up for and then you don't realise you're tied into them for a long period of time. But also more transparent pricing as well, so that when there is a discount, you know it's a genuine genuine discount. And I think we've all seen those stores that are on perpetual sales that offer big discounts all the time, and you get quite savvy about that. But when it comes to buying online, that can be more difficult because you might be a one-time purchase. It might be the first time you use the store as well. So we want a real level playing field so that when something's a sale, it's a genuine sale. And when someone signs up for a subscription, if it's easy in, it's easy out as well.
Yes, and I'm sure that many people will want to see an end to those so-called subscription traps. But this is a policy that was already announced by Keir Starmer. You're really just announcing today that you're bringing it forward by a few months. And that's what I mean by tinkering, in a way. I mean, Andy Burnham's promised the biggest political and economic overhaul for 40 years, and yet we're getting small, incremental policies like this.
So, we are announcing we're bringing it forward by a few months. No one's trying to disguise that, by the way. That's clearly what we're doing, and we're doing it because we think it's important. So if someone signs up for a subscription any time in 2027, it'll be covered by these rules. Previously, it would have been a few months later. So we're going to consult in the autumn with businesses to make sure we get that implemented in time for 2027. The retail pricing to make sure that there are genuine discounts, that is a new policy. And I do understand, I'm kind of pleased that you've raised this, really, because a lot of people have said to me, well, this is a relatively small thing. I don't think it is small, by the way, because it's about 14 quid a month for people. But you have to look at it in the context of all of the other things that we've announced as well. The £2 bus fare cap, the reduction in VAT on electricity prices, the business rates relief for pubs and hospitality businesses. And the reason that it is lots of small things is because there isn't really a silver bullet on cost of living. We need to do all of the different things. And when I've thought about this, I think about it like when I go to the supermarket, everything that I put in my trolley, I want to make sure I get something at the best price, because they all add up at the tail. All the pennies and pounds add up at the tail, and that's why it makes a significant difference there. So it's really about attention to detail, doing all of the different things that help people with cost, and also what we're doing on improving wages as well. All of those things add up, and anyone like you or me that's managing their budget on a monthly basis really understands that.
Well, talking about managing your budget, the other question I want to ask is, is the Prime Minister being honest about some of the trade-offs that are coming down the path? He's already got a high tax take, high public spending as well as high debt, and he's committed to big spending in the future on defence and on social care as well. But there seems to be little acknowledgement of some of those tough decisions he's got to make down the track. Do you acknowledge that those decisions are looming?
Why don't I trot through some of those trade-offs now, and then you and listeners and viewers can make a judgment as to whether you think we're being honest about them. So the big one I mentioned was the VAT on electricity prices. That's about £850 million. And we said we paid for that by cancelling the digital ID programme. The £2 bus fare cap is being supported by nearly £500 million of funding that largely runs through combined authorities in local areas. And the rates relief for pubs, that's about £100 million. And largely that's being funded by cancelling release in other areas such as vape shops.
Okay.
So those are the trade-offs that we've made, and we're making those trade-offs because we're sitting within the fiscal rules that we've got within the budget that we have. So it's really about managing within existing budgets.
OK, and absolutely, you're talking about those announcements you've made, but there are also a growing list of promises to end rough sleeping, to fix social care, to deliver the biggest council house-building programme since the post-war period, to fulfil NATO commitments as well, which will see defence spending going up as well. It's those bigger issues that are coming down the track, and that's what I'm talking about levelling with the public about. I mean, can you, for example, rule out tax rises come the budget to pay for those things?
Well, look, what I've just been clear about is that when we've made an announcement, we've made sure that they are costed, and we're working within our fiscal rules, both our debt rule and our budget rule as well, to make sure that over the 3-year period we get the finances into a good position. And we're also sticking with our manifesto commitments as well. And so for all of those issues that you've described, we'll work within that context. And then, of course, ultimately any changes come at the budget. But this is very much about reprioritisation, about putting money into the priorities that people want, whilst working within the genuine constraints that we have as a country around tax and spend. And the bottom line for the Prime Minister is making sure that people feel better off at the end of the month. That's what he's really focused on, and that's why there's such a focus on giving people a bit of breathing space and helping with cost of living.
OK, but on tax rises, can you rule them out?
Well, look, I'm not going to write the budget on Sky this morning, clearly. The Chancellor does that quite rightly. That's very much above my pay grade. But what we've committed to is ensuring that we act within the bounds of the manifesto and also that we stick with our fiscal rules. And we've done that consistently over the course of the last 2 years, and we'll continue to do that for the Parliament.
Our city editor, Mark Kleiman, has broken the news this morning that Thames Water paid its finance chief £1 million last month as part of a sign-on fee. This, of course, even though the company is on the brink of collapse. I wonder what your reaction was to that.
Well, we have taken action on company directors for water companies. I mean, I used to work in the private sector myself, and I worked in a business that was very capital intensive, and I think what we've seen is a complete failure in the water industry to invest in the infrastructure that the country needs. And I don't want to see executives rewarded for failure. And I think what we've seen from Thames Water over recent weeks and months are, increasingly sort of desperate attempts to try and get their business in order. But really, I don't think the customers of Thames Water are very happy about that. And I think all of us, when we look at both, water quality and water supply, we're concerned as well. And that's why the government's, taking action. We're building 9 reservoirs. It'll be the first reservoirs that we've built in this country for decades, and that's why we're suffering these shortages of water. But there's been such a lack of investment in infrastructure in the country, and I know you were talking earlier about these heat waves that we're having, the lack of rain that we've had. But for a country like Britain, with our capability to store water that we should have as a result of reservoir building, it's been incredibly short-sighted, and really the blame for that absolutely does need to be laid at the door of the companies that have just failed to invest.
And give us an idea of what's next for Thames Water. Clearly, we know that Andy Burnham has talked about more public control. What is the next step? Do you want to see it taken into special administration? What do you think?
Well, what I want to make sure is that we deal with this situation in a way that provides the best outcome, both for the environment for water customers, but also for taxpayers as well. I mean, you're talking to the minister who, my last job in the last Parliament was taking through the nationalisation of British Steel, and that was a very particular situation, and we did it in the absolute assurance that we would get the infrastructure secured and get good value for taxpayers. But I think what we're talking about here with Thames Water and the other water companies is ensuring that we hit those objectives and also we get good value for taxpayers as well. I don't think that means that we automatically jump to a model of ownership, but clearly there's got to be better management of our water companies.
I need to let you go in a minute, but I do just want to ask you about the early release scheme again. The Prime Minister announced exemptions to it last week, but there has, as you'll know, been a huge backlash about the possible early release of 2 of the killers of PC Andrew Harper. Get us up to date with the latest on that. Is the Prime Minister looking again at the early release of killers of police officers and other emergency workers?
Well, look, I don't think anybody in the country wants to see PC Harper's killers on the streets. But I think we also have to face up to the situation that we're in, which is a desperate shortage of prison capacity. The previous government managed to close a whole load of prisons and only add on 500 places in 14 years. We've added on thousands more police cells since we came, prison cells rather, since we came into power. We're adding thousands more on between now and 2030. The Prime Minister's personally intervened to ensure that the most dangerous prisoners will not be released. And any prisoners that are released, they're not being set free, by the way. They will be tagged and monitored as well. But the thing that we're trying to balance with this is ensuring that if someone is arrested for a serious crime or if they're convicted in a court, then actually there will be space for them to go to as well. And I think what it's really important for your viewers to understand is that we're on a knife edge with this in terms of prison capacity. And it's just like the discussion we've had about water. We shouldn't be in this position. And we are in this position due to a complete failure to invest in infrastructure. So we're doing that now, but I recognise that is it's a slightly longer term thing, but we're adding those places on as fast as we possibly can. And of course, the Prime Minister is looking very, very carefully at making sure we keep the most dangerous prisoners behind bars.
But there's unlikely to be any changes of what you're saying because conditions won't allow that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I didn't say that, but I also haven't promised anything.
OK. Neatly managed. I know you're walking a bit of a tightrope there. Just very quickly on that issue, The Times is reporting that the Prime Minister has told that these prisoners can't be blocked from release, essentially because there's no specific offence for manslaughter of an emergency worker. Can you comment on that at all?
Well, I mean, the law was tightened up on this with mandatory Harper's law, essentially mandatory prison sentences for police officers following PC Harper's tragic death. But I think I'd go back to the first comment I made. I don't think anybody wants to see PC Harper's killers on the streets. But the reality of the situation that we're in is extreme pressure on the prison estate, and we do need to make sure that the most dangerous offenders remain behind bars, and that's what the Prime Minister's focused on.
OK, I really should let you go. Chris McDonald, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Bye.
Thank you. Do stay with us. Coming up next, we're going to be taking you through the morning papers, putting out some of the headlines there with our reviewer from The Independent, Millie Cook.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
So, time to take a look at what's making the headlines in today's newspapers. I'm joined today by the political correspondent at The Independent, Millie Cook. So, very good morning to you. Lovely to see you. So, you have picked out the front page of the Daily Telegraph to kick us off, and they have a story suggesting that spy cameras have been found on a Navy ship. Is that right? So it's Navy drones,
so it's spy cameras found on Navy drones, and it's a really interesting story because it's effectively parts that were supplied from China, and they found that they're sending heartbeat communications back to China. So it's effectively just comms to let the factory know that the machine is still working. It's still sort of operating. However, the Navy is quite upset at the idea that any communications are going back to China. At the moment, they're saying that there's no evidence that any sort of sensitive information was handed over and anything beyond what that communication tool was meant to be doing. But I think the problem here is that they weren't aware that it was doing that at all. And so even though the sort of, on the face of it, it's meant to be kind of not sensitive information that's being sent back, China, obviously, we've got a very difficult relationship with China. There's been allegations of espionage before, many different allegations. And I think that
for any form of sort of military equipment to be sending information to China is a real red flag, and it's completely the opposite of what the Royal Navy would want from its equipment. So at the moment, I think there are now lots of calls for an audit to be done of all of the military parts to check that where we've got them from and whether any of them are submitting any data back to China or any sort of hostile state.
Exactly, because I guess that anyone reading this will worry about what other forms of communication there might be going in the wrong direction. But as you mentioned, the Ministry of Defence is keen to stress, they say that the transmissions had been found during a routine assessment and said no data had been compromised. So clearly they're not concerned that anything has happened as yet. But as you say, if there's any kind of communication, it does raise eyebrows.
Yeah, and it's worrying that they weren't aware that it was there in the first place, I think, is the other thing for me.
Yeah.
Why was that in the equipment without them being aware of it, I think, is the sort of broader problem there.
Indeed. Let's move on to a story that is picked up by all the papers. In the Daily Mirror is the coverage that you've picked out. This is the rejection by Benjamin Netanyahu of Donald Trump's Board of Peace plan for Gaza, which he kind of announced with a certain amount of fanfare some time ago. So it's taken a while for the Israeli Prime Minister to come to this decision.
Yeah, it's quite a disheartening story, isn't it? Because obviously Trump is trying to make progress here, and he announced it, and it suggested that there was going to be progress. He had said that effectively Hamas had agreed to disarm, which is a significant breakthrough, under the sort of guarantee that then Israel would follow. But they've said that that's not enough. They need full disarmament already from Hamas before they start to take
Because in the plan, it's a 15-point plan, there's this kind of phased, staged disarmament, isn't there, which would be followed by Israel pulling out of the territory. But they're saying we need total disarmament before we move anywhere.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's a hardening of their position, I think, and asking for a total disarmament before they have any movement is obviously a really difficult ask, because with any kind of ceasefire, generally, you see both sides moving inch by inch slowly in order to make sure they're both on sort of an equal footing. For Israel to say that they won't move at all until Hamas completely disarms, you understand it. Obviously, after the October 7th attack, Israel's in a really difficult position. It needs to show that it's protecting its citizens. But equally, it's hard to see how you'll get any movement when both sides aren't moving at a similar pace.
And to what extent do you think politics do come in here? Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu is facing a lot of pressure from right-wingers in the country. He's got elections coming up. To what extent do you think he feels he has to say this for the domestic audience?
I think there's certainly some of that. It's the first elections he will have seen since the October 7th attack. So it's it's politically difficult timing for him. But obviously, it's hard to stomach when you see politics playing a role in sort of war politics, because obviously domestic politics should be sort of kept separate to that because the implications are so great.
Does this raise questions about the efficacy of the Board of Peace, this new Board of Peace, that they've had this pushback so early on? And what also does it say about the relationship between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, who have been close allies, and now Netanyahu standing up to one of his closest allies?
I mean, absolutely. I think that was a relationship that Trump himself, it's something that he touts as being a very, very strong one. And it's one that will definitely come as a massive blow to him, Israel standing up to him here. And yeah, I think it does raise questions about the efficacy of the Board of Peace. But I also don't think that anyone necessarily expected it to be an easy thing to do. I don't think from the outset there was this expectation that it would immediately solve everything. I think that is a longer-term thing that will take one step forward, two steps back. And I'm not overly surprised that we've had this level of pushback early on, given the fractious state of relations.
And I noticed that one of Trump's senior diplomats on that Board of Peace is talking about negotiations continuing, so we'll see where this goes. Let's return to domestic matters inside the Daily Mirror. They claim an exclusive about rail fares, or certainly rail cards and how much discount they can give people. What did they say?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's sort of part of Andy Burnham's wider push to bring down the cost of living. He's unveiled a swathe of measures to try and make it easier for people to afford everything, really, especially daily essentials. And this story is about the possibility of a national rail card. So at the moment, you can get a network rail card, which is for sort of London, the South West, which brings down rail fares by about 30%. This is a possibility of extending that across the country. So it will even out the playing field between kind of rail fares in the north and then rail fares in the southwest. And I think it's just speaking to the massive cost of rail fares in the UK. You can get a train that is an hour-and-a-half train and it can cost 60 quid. And I think that Andy Burnham he's spoken about this a fair bit before, that rail fares are too high. And I think this is him floating the possibility of intervening on it. But obviously with anything like this, it comes with a significant cost. In here, modelling suggests it would have a net cost of £270 million in the first year, falling to £120 million over the long term. There's some suggestion this could be made up by the profits that can come from selling rail cards and also extra ticket fares. But obviously they would need to fund that from the outset, and it's quite a large amount of money.
Let's move on to a story inside the Daily Mail that you've spotted. This is saying that J.K. Rowling is offering to bankroll women fighting to keep single-sex spaces.
Yeah, the backdrop is really difficult here because it's following the Supreme Court ruling on biological sex, which ruled effectively that under the Equality Act, transgender women and transgender men are not classed as either women or men based on their transition. J.K. Rowling, who's been a very vocal gender-critical campaigner, has offered to effectively support women who are fighting against any what they believe are infringements upon their rights. So she's supporting women who are working in the NHS, say, who believe that their rights are being infringed upon, for example, having to share a single-sex space with a transgender woman. The difficulty here is that the law it's a minefield. It's a really difficult piece of legislation. Trans people are arguing that it effectively bars them from public life. They're in a really difficult position when it comes to using toilets. For example, a trans woman wouldn't be able to use the women's loos. That puts them in a really hard spot because they risk outing themselves if they use the men's loos, and often there aren't a gender-neutral facility available. Equally, women argue that having a trans woman in the female loos puts them in a really difficult spot and it infringes upon their rights. So it's such a minefield, but J.K. Rowling is weighing in on what she believes is the right thing to do, which is to help pay the legal fees of women who are bringing legal action against companies who are infringing their rights, they believe.
Let's move to The Guardian next. We've had a lot of fairly awful stories around maternity care in this country, haven't we, of late?
Yeah.
The Guardian has coverage here of people feeling that they're under real pressure and quite concerned about their births.
This is a really shocking story. It's about women facing 2-hour drives to give birth after maternity cuts were made in rural areas. So it's effectively women who are due to give birth soon worrying that their only option is to have a home birth and fearing that there aren't enough medical facilities in the local area, which I think in the UK, which is a deeply advanced economy, it's a really shocking thing that you've got people genuinely fearing for their lives when they give birth. And I mean, it follows as you mentioned, a few really shocking reports about the state of maternity care in the UK. And this quotes one woman saying, she has the option of potentially giving birth in a lay-by on the North Devon Link Road as we try to get to the hospital, or opting for free birthing at home with no access to maternity care. She's saying that she's got a family history of labour taking under 2 hours from start to finish, and she lives more than 2 hours away from the hospital, which really sums up the difficult choices that women are making. One woman in here was thinking of spending her savings on temporary accommodation near the hospital during that period where she's expecting to give birth. But obviously these things are very unpredictable. Yeah. And it's just, I mean, it must be so scary.
It must be scary, and you're at such a vulnerable stage of your life, and clearly your baby is incredibly vulnerable, so you can understand some of the concerns, and clearly it highlights some of the pressures on the system. There's a way to go, isn't there, until people feel confident. We haven't got very much time left, so we're going to skip on to something a little lighter, and this is, you've confessed that this is very much your idea to talk about this story.
Yeah, it always
which
is.
I applaud. And the question is, do cats always land on their feet?
I mean, I feel like I'm always talking about my cat on Sky. It's a
Nothing
story.
wrong with that.
It's a story about the hot weather, and it's a warning to pet owners to keep the windows shut, because obviously there's that age-old story about how cats always land on their feet. Apparently, though, that's not always the case, and that pets are more at risk of injuries from windows being left open in the hot weather, and cats who aren't aware, if they're indoor cats, aren't aware of what might happen if they fall out a window. And so pet owners are being warned to make sure that they're not especially on second, third story buildings, that their pets aren't able to climb out the window.
So the fact that not when the weather's warm is the fact that cats are more likely to jump out of the window when it's warm, not that they're not likely to land on their feet when it's warm because it's too hot.
Apparently, generally, they're not quite as good at landing on their feet as we might have thought. And I think it's more about, so my cat's an outdoor cat, she's quite good at jumping and she's used to it, but I think if you've got an indoor cat who hasn't really practiced doing high things, they might not be so good at it.
I love it, but I don't think there's much more to discuss on that. Want to keep strawberries fresh? Thistle kelp is in the Daily Mail.
Yeah, this is an interesting one about using seaweed. It's a new way of coating strawberries to keep them fresh. The thing that is sort of concerning me is what does it taste like? It's one thing to keep it fresh, but if it then tastes like
seaweed... Do you not
seaweed,
peel it off?
But you can peel it off if you don't want to have it on there. I think you can wash them, but you also can't. I don't know. I think it's just on there.
Is it to not use plastic or just?
I think it's just it keeps them. It stops water loss over 4 days.
Okay.
So it's a really clever way of keeping strawberries fresh and increase their shelf life. But I think I'm slightly off-put by the idea of my strawberries being covered in seaweed.
Quite like seaweed, but you know, maybe not with strawberries. We're out of time. Thanks so much, Millie. Stay with us for the top stories. That was great.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with me, Anna Jones. Here's how things are looking. One of the world's most wanted men, alleged crime boss Daniel Kinahan, is charged in Dublin after being extradited from Dubai. Andy Burnham's summer roadshow begins this week, hearing from those across the country about their cost of living concerns. A British couple jailed in Iran accused of spying end their hunger strike after nearly 3 months. Also today, we'll be seeing what's making the headlines in today's newspapers with political correspondent of The Independent, Millie Cook. Plus, Bentleys and BMWs are amongst the supercars seized in a crackdown on antisocial driving. Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us. So, one of the world's most wanted men, suspected crime boss Daniel Kinahan, is this morning behind bars in Dublin after being extradited from Dubai. The 49-year-old built a boxing empire while in exile, but now faces trial charged with directing organised crime. Well, the Kinahan cartel is accused of importing tons of drugs and firearms around the world and has been linked to more than a dozen gangland murders. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy has the story.
Touchdown for Ireland's most wanted man. A government jet brings the alleged crime boss Daniel Kinahan back to Dublin after his battle against extradition from Dubai failed. It's his first visit home for a decade. In an intense security operation, the 49-year-old was taken to the non-jury Special Criminal Court. In a brief hearing, he was charged with directing the activities of an organised crime group. Kinahan's return being hailed as a significant day for Irish law enforcement.
I want to pay very strong tribute to Garda Síochána, to the Garda Commissioner, in terms of the Gardaí's success in tackling organised crime in a very effective way. And also I pay tribute to the authorities in the United Arab Emirates for the strong cooperation with Ireland over recent years.
A boxing weigh-in at a Dublin hotel 10 years ago changed everything. A hit squad, some disguised as armed police, attacked the event with assault rifles, hunting for Daniel Kinahan. He escaped, but one of his associates, David Byrne, was shot dead.
It was the worst criminal outrage probably in criminal history in Ireland. People going around with Kalashnikovs trying to kill rival gang members in the middle of the day and trying to evade justice. That was never seen at that level before.
The hotel attack accelerated a feud with the rival Hutch gang, which left 18 people dead and paralysed parts of inner-city Dublin with fear.
It's very much like out of a horror movie, because it was frightening. There was armed guards on every street corner searching cars, and it was all about who was going to be shot next.
In the aftermath, Kinahan and some of his associates fled abroad, settling in Dubai. Irish police allege that while there, Kinahan continued to direct organised crime. 4 years ago, US authorities travelled to Dublin to offer a $5 million bounty on top Kinahans, including Daniel. They described the gang as one of the most dangerous in the world. Behind the scenes, there was intense work by Irish police and politicians securing a new extradition deal with the UAE. Kinahan's days in the Gulf were now numbered. Daniel Kinahan has now been remanded in custody, thought to be at Ireland's only maximum security prison in Portlaoise. He knows his legal battle will be tough. "I think we know I won't get bail, but thanks for explaining," he told the court. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
The new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham's summer cost of living road trip begins this week as he asks those across the country how the government can better their lives. It's going to include a crackdown on so-called subscription traps to help against rising bills. Well, Rob is here. So, Andy Burnham's having a summer tour. What's the main purpose of it, really?
I think there's a few purposes. At face value, there's, no harm in a Prime Minister spending more time talking to the people that he is making decisions that will affect their lives and sort of hearing the strength of feeling with which they care about certain topics. That said, Number 10 does have access to pretty much all the kind of polling data and focus group data it could want. So, you know, you don't need to necessarily kind of go out and about to figure out what are the main things that are affecting people's lives. So, but I think part of it is generally kind of as it's billed. The other part as well is, you know, it's good for a Prime Minister to be seen to be listening. And Andy Burnham is quite good at this sort of stuff. He's good at the kind of more natural interactions that maybe came kind of slightly more difficult to his successor. I think Keir Starmer was sort of struggled maybe with that part of the job. And he's got a pretty savvy communications team around him as well that are sort of ready to film it and clip it up and pop it on his social media channels. He's also announcing what's been called by Number 10 a series of everyday fixes, the first of which today is around subscription traps, where you sign up for a subscription and renews at a much higher price, and also talking about opening a consultation on sort of fake discount pricing in shops. Now, neither of those are really sort of big policies in pure policy terms. The subscription thing was coming in anyway, but in spring next year, he's bringing it forward to January. And the second thing around pricing is sort of toughening up, making it easier for the Competition and Markets Authority to go after stores doing this. And it's just a consultation that he's opening up on it. So, yeah, it is about those big, broad political messages that we've already seen in the first few weeks of his premiership, about listening to people, about striking a more optimistic note, and about focusing in policy terms on the very, very practical, relatable cost of living stuff that affects people's everyday lives. We're still very much in that phase of his premiership.
Yeah, and the industry minister who I spoke to last hour was very keen to stress that you might think each thing is small, but it all adds up, and it does make a real difference to people struggling with their budgets. That was the point they're trying to make. I also asked him about early release of prisoners, because there's been this huge backlash about the fact that two of PC Andrew Harper's killers could be eligible for early release, and there's been a big push to make sure that doesn't happen. What did you tell us about where the government stands on this?
Yeah, I think this is potentially the kind of trickiest thing that Andy Burnham has been faced with so far in the first sort of month in which he's been in Number 10. He, of course, paused that early release scheme that was put in place by Keir Starmer, or was due to come into force anyway in the autumn, reviewed it, added some exemptions in, and now it is still going ahead, where people will basically be let out of their prison sentence earlier than they would have done otherwise. At the moment, it does include two of the people convicted for the death of PC Andrew Harper. There has been a push, not least by his widow, to change that, to exempt them, to keep them in prison. And there's been much reporting over the weekend, sort of back and forth, about whether Number 10 is minded to do it or not. Have a listen, and we'll talk about maybe what we can read into the clip in a moment.
I don't think anybody in the country wants to see PC Harper's killers on the streets. But I think we also have to face up to the situation that we're in, which is a desperate shortage of prison capacity. The previous government managed to close a whole load of prisons and only add on 500 places in 14 years. We've added on thousands more police cells since we came, prison cells rather, since we came into power. We're adding thousands more on between now and 2030.
So what do you make of it?
So it strikes me that they are trying to find a way to keep these two men behind bars, to kind of carve them out from this early release. There's a report in the Times, though, today that it's not being confirmed by those within government, but it's certainly not being completely watered down or steered away from either, that one of the difficulties is, because they were both convicted of manslaughter, and this was before the offence came in, a specific offence of killing an emergency worker, which, of course, was sort of known as Harper's Law. It was introduced after, because there was no specific offence. It is difficult to carve them out, because you would be in a situation where other people that were due for early release, convicted of manslaughter on similar sentences, would say, well, you know, we should be eligible. You know, why you would have to keep them in as well, basically, and then there could possibly be a legal challenge against it. So my sense is that there probably is the political will to try and do this, but they're trying to find a way through the legal system and through the detail of this to make it happen without causing themselves problems whereby you sort of draw the line and then the line moves and then it keeps moving, it keeps moving, it keeps moving, and then the whole point of the policy in terms of easing pressure on the prison estate becomes pointless. But look, Reform are talking about this morning. They're trying to pile pressure. The Tories have been talking about it a lot as well. So I think, you know, amid the kind of sort of feel-good mood that Andy Burnham is trying to project with this summer tour, it is one of the things that threatens to blow it off course.
OK, yeah, an interesting one to watch. May not have heard the last of that. Thanks very much indeed, Rob. So Andy Burnham will also use his tour to focus on reviving high street retailers. But if he's going to be successful, he'll have to battle long-term shopping trends and some of the economic policies of his predecessor. Our correspondent Charlotte Leeming reports now from Wakefield.
Back in the 1980s, Wakefield's High Street was booming with the opening of the Riding's shopping centre, The Jewel in the Crown. Described as the next Harrods, people flocked here to spend their money. But times have changed. Many shops have now shut or moved out of town. The precinct's been slated for future closure and possible demolition for redevelopment. But new Prime Minister Andy Burnham says he wants to bring back hope to the High Street and tackle the cost of living. Going on tour to meet people and hear their problems. So are they as hopeful as he is?
It's a real struggle. I mean, me and my wife work, and we work 40 hours a week, and you're still struggling to pay your bills then. So, yeah, I think people that are on minimum wage and things are really finding it really difficult.
Put more things on to try and, like, revamp this area a bit and, you know, you put more focus on some of the historic buildings because some area of Wakefield are really nice. We just kind of get drowned out by a lot of the other not-so-nice buildings.
They're on about pulling Ridings down. There's all them shops in there. Where are they going to go? Pulling the flats down at the back of it. No, it's not good enough, is it?
Sofa store manager Mark Watson says high streets up and down the country desperately need support to survive, particularly with the rise in business costs and a reduction in footfall.
Like I say, the high street isn't dead. It just needs sort of rejuvenating, and obviously they're talking about redeveloping the Ridings, perhaps pulling it down. That isn't the answer. For us, we know some of the larger retailers are coming out of the Ridings, which will leave obviously some of your smaller independents sort of in limbo without the attraction of the bigger units to pull people in here. So what's going to happen?
Andy Burnham has said it's his mission to help ease the financial pressure on people. He's already set out measures to cap bus fares and to reduce the cost of energy. But the Conservatives are asking him to explain in detail how he actually plans to fund all of these initiatives.
Lovely to meet you. Nice to meet you.
The PM's heading out for community conversations. But it's his actions, not words, he's going to be judged on. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Wakefield.
Now, in developing news this morning, Sky News has learned that the financially stricken Thames Water handed a £1 million sign-on fee to its finance chief, despite teetering on the brink of collapse. The seven-figure payment was made last month to Steve Buck, who joined the company in April last year. The money is understood to have been drawn from an emergency borrowing facility. Well, earlier I also asked the Business and Health Minister, Chris McDonald, about just this.
I don't want to see executives rewarded for failure. And I think what we've seen from Thames Water over recent weeks and months are, increasingly sort of desperate attempts to try and get their business in order. But really, I don't think the customers of Thames Water are very happy about that. And I think all of us, when we look at both, water quality and water supply, we're concerned as well. And that's why the government's, taking action. We're building 9 reservoirs. It'll be the first reservoirs that we've built in this country for decades, and that's why we're suffering these shortages of water.
The Ministry of Defence says no sensitive data has been compromised after it was revealed that cameras on Royal Navy drones were connected to a system in China. Cameras on the Navy's K3 Scout surveillance drone were found to be sending so-called heartbeat communications to a device in China. The Ministry of Defence said the transmissions had been found during a routine assessment, but said no data had been compromised. Now, a British couple jailed in Iran after being accused of spying have ended their hunger strike after nearly 3 months. Craig and Lindsay Foreman were arrested in January last year while passing through Iran on a motorcycle journey from Europe to Australia. They were sentenced to 10 years in prison and both adamantly deny the spying charges. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Anjum Pirbakos, who's here with me. So, Anjum, tell us a little bit about why they went on hunger strike and why it's now ended.
So the hunger strike started because there was a protest, and following the protest, the couple decided to go on a hunger strike in solidarity with the other prisoners who were kept in this particular facility in Tehran. And obviously their campaigning for their release, and they deny the charges. And there's a campaign going on here that their son is heavily involved in. His name's Joe Bennett, and he's been meeting with various people to continue that conversation. But the hunger strike itself has now ended. But in the last 5 days, people around the world in support have also taken part in this hunger strike, including their son, Joe Bennett, who says that he's not going to stop campaigning, even though the hunger strike has ended, for their release, and he's not going to be satisfied until his parents are home and having a meal around the family table. He's been in conversation with various MPs in order to push on this situation and get their release kind of expedited as soon as possible. And he said that they've had lots of positive conversations and constructive conversations, but now he really wants to see some affirmative action going forward to ensure the release of his parents.
Yeah, it's very difficult for him. We're going to be talking to him a little bit later on. Do we know how they're doing?
So we know that they've had some really kind of trying circumstances and challenging situations. We know that Lindsay was in solitary confinement. We know that they had a period where they were unable to have any communication with their families, months on end. And also the Iranian authorities have previously said that they would be released. So all of these things have been really difficult to manage for both Lindsay and Craig, but also their family here who are having to experience this and obviously not being able to do what they want to do in order to secure their release.
Yeah, and all the while, strikes have been continuing off and on against the country, which must add to the stress. As you say, we're going to be talking to Joe Bennett a little bit later on to hear more about his parents' hunger strike and his own joining in. But, Angela, thanks very much indeed. Now, more than £8 million worth of vehicles have been seized by the Metropolitan Police in a crackdown on supercars in central London. 90 cars were impounded over the weekend in an operation targeting uninsured, antisocial and dangerous drivers. It included Bentleys, BMWs, Lamborghinis and an uninsured Ferrari, which was worth £3.7 million. It's the highest number and value of cars seized in the operation's 5-year history.
So this time of the year we have an influx of foreign registered vehicles where their countries are too hot. They come to London for, a month, 2 months at a time, and they bring their what we class as supercars with them. Whilst we like them to come to London, some of them do cause issues with their driving, the revving of the engines, the speeding, the popping of the engines, and generally just cause a nuisance to members of the public that are trying to enjoy central London.
So time now to talk to the Tories. I'm joined by the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Alex Burkhart, this morning. Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed for dropping by. I want to start off by talking about Andy Burnham's tour of the country. He says he's in listening mode. He's going around talking to people about the cost of living pressures that they're facing. Do you welcome him going and talking to people about their concerns and their worries?
I think this is just all very superficial. And obviously, Andy Burnham's operation, political terms, quite sensibly, is using the summer to go around and do press conferences and things before we get back to Westminster at the start of next month and the really difficult questions start. And the new Prime Minister has done, I think, one sort of proper sit-down interview since he became Prime Minister. So this is very easy August stuff, but it doesn't contain any detail about how he's going to fix the fundamental problems that the country faces. A few days ago, we discovered that for the first time, our national debt is £3 trillion. And unless government gets a grip on that, unless it comes to terms with the fact that we are spending far too much money as a country, we are borrowing too much money, and we are taxing people too much, unless that's fixed, then things are just going to get much, much worse and quite quickly.
Isn't it the case that we're going to hear about those big issues come the budget? In the meantime, he would say there's nothing superficial about listening to people's concerns. He's been announcing a series of measures which he says give people breathing space. Today, we're learning about bringing forward their plans on subscription traps, trying to block them, this idea that people get locked into subscriptions that go up in price and they're unaware of it.
Now, you'll know that legislation was brought in by the Conservatives and was already announced by Keir Starmer.
Yes, the government is open about that, but they're bringing it forward
here we are.
It's enacted quicker.
Here we are. Within a few weeks of coming into power, what's really happened is that they've run out of new announcements and they're re-announcing things that have already been legislated for and were already announced by the previous Prime Minister. And so, as I say, this is superficial. It's very thin. And it's simply not the case that we should be waiting until late October to know what the new Prime Minister's grand economic strategy is and how he is going to deal with something that is a major concern, which is a £3 trillion debt.
Well, you say he's run out of ideas. We may well hear more announcements, and he'll point to the £2 cap on bus fares. He'll talk about scrapping VAT on electricity bills. He'll say that those kind of things do make a difference. They do all add up. But he's also
again,
made
how are they
promises.
going to be paid for? Right?
Well, he says
it's very, very important that the message that we are sending to the bond markets, who determine the rate at which the country borrows, is that anything that the government is spending is fully costed. And there is a real danger here that a Prime Minister acts as though the country has more money than it does. There's a very good piece in the Telegraph this morning that says, actually, if you add up all the things that Andy Burnham has been floating, it's tens of billions of pounds. And that speculative cost can have a real impact on the cost of borrowing and the amount of money that the country will be spending in interest payments. So this is it. We cannot wait until the end of October to know what the Prime Minister and his Chancellor thinks about the shape of the economy and the future of the economy.
But he's also talking about quite big issues. I mean, it takes time, doesn't it, to formulate this.
I'm glad you're defending him. It's very nice of him that you're defending him.
I'm testing out your theories.
Well, I think the truth is that there is a major issue with the government finances, and we've got a chap who has become Prime Minister without facing serious questioning, either in the leadership contest or since he became Prime Minister. And it's not going to be very much longer for him to run away from that. But there is a cost right now to him not talking about where the money is going to come from and how he's going to fix the problems that that lie in the books.
OK, we'll have lots more of that. And as you say, come the new term, when everyone's back, I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions then as well, won't there? I just want to ask you about the latest on early release of prisoners. We heard the exemptions to the scheme announced by Andy Burnham after a review last week, but there has been a lot of concern about the early release of two of those convicted of the manslaughter of PC Andrew Harper. What's your take on what should happen now?
Those people should not be released. And the people who were responsible for the death of a police officer should not be released. And as Kemi Badenoch said last week, actually, if you were to just create an exemption for people who were responsible for the deaths of people who worked in the emergency services, it's not a very large number of people, involved in the scheme at all, who would be touched by this scheme. They should obviously be covered. So first thing. The second thing is that there are alternatives to what the Prime Minister and his team have announced. The first is that the government should obviously be looking to purchase prison places abroad. This is what Sweden's just done, purchased a group of prison places in Estonia. But they're moving straight to a position of releasing people, and that's wrong.
Let me just pick you up on the question of PC Andrew Harper's killers, because the Times is reporting today that the government has been warned that they may not be able to take some of those steps to make sure that emergency workers are exempted because of possible legal challenges.
Then the government should change the law. The government has a large majority. It is capable of legislating in order to make sure to shut down legal challenge, and it should do so. Instead, it's in this, I think, very lamentable state of computer says no. They're the government, they have a majority, they're in charge, it's up to them. They should not be letting these people out of jail.
OK, and on the question of prison places abroad, for example, they will obviously counter, saying that they inherited a system that was broken, that the capacity in the male estate was at 99%, and they've been forced to take steps they would obviously rather not take.
The government has options. The government can do what the government in Sweden is doing, which is buying prison places abroad. It can change building regulations so that it can speed up the building programme of prisons, which we started. And it should also be changing the law so that it's much easier to deport foreign criminals, many of whom are in our jails. So, again, the government has options. It has a majority. It should be taking those choices. Instead, it's taking the easy option, which is a very dangerous option, and releasing hardened criminals into the public environment.
I just want to ask you about Thames Water, because our city editor, Mark Lyman, has revealed this morning that Thames Water paid its finance chief £1 million last month. It was a signing-on fee, as I understand it. I just wonder what your reaction was to that.
Yeah, I think Thames Water has been very badly managed over the years, and the public have, been on the wrong end of that. I suspect that I suspect that their time running things may be running out, and that may affect their judgment.
Well, yeah, and they are teetering on the brink of collapse, aren't they? What would you like to see the next step be?
So I think what's very important is that the government puts in place structures that make sure that water supply is protected for the public. What we can't have is a water company just going into collapse without contingency plans in place. But at the moment, I haven't heard any of those contingency plans.
OK, well, Alex Burkhart, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks
very
much indeed. Thank you. Now, for some of the morning's other stories, and Houthi rebels have released footage appearing to show missiles and drones being launched towards Saudi targets on the Red Sea coast of Yemen. At least 7 people were killed and 16 injured in the attack, which the Houthis claim was aimed at military forces and warehouses. The Iranian-backed group also say they attacked an oil facility in Saudi Arabia. A woman and a baby have been killed in a boat accident near the Statue of Liberty in New York. 12 more people were rescued in the incident on Saturday night. The operator of a boat has been charged with reckless endangerment. A Roman shipwreck has been discovered around 3 miles off the coast of Sicily. Italy's heritage police say they explored the vessel with the help of scuba divers and underwater cameras, finding hundreds of items which may have been used to transport wine, olive oil and fish sauce. And blockbuster film The Odyssey has become director Christopher Nolan's highest-grossing movie, passing $1.1 billion at the box office. The film follows Matt Damon as Odysseus on his 10-year journey home after the Trojan War. And it's only been open a month. Now, the unprecedented heat waves we're experiencing could lead to soaring food prices, according to farmers. So heat spells are having a devastating impact on crops, and months of drought will destroy any prospect of a good quality harvest. Sky's Ashish Joshi sent this from a farm in West Sussex.
Franz de Boer is pretty resilient. Farmers need to be. But a 5th heat wave is unprecedented, and it follows the driest July on record.
I mean, we've had no useful rainfall since the beginning of June, so it's no wonder there's no grass growth at all, and that's really unusual for us. But it's becoming the norm now.
This field should have good grazing grass, but it's scorched. He's not buying any more lambs, as it's expensive to feed them. For us, it could mean less lamb on the market at higher prices.
I mean, this should be about 7 foot tall, should have nice big juicy cobs on it, but as you can see, it's quite dehydrated.
His maize is wilting in the field.
Very low grain count, and you know, the whole thing is starting to dehydrate with lack of water, so it's a real concern.
And it's the same across the sector.
Livestock farmers are struggling. They've got no grass to feed their cows, so they're starting to feed their winter feed, which is not a good time of year to be doing that when they should be grazing the grass. But if you look at the national situation and then the situation across Europe, put that all together and it's a recipe for, again, inflation on food.
Large swathes of the country are already in drought, and it might be the whole country soon, with little rain in sight. The problem is it's not just British farmers who are feeling the impact of this extreme heat. Farmers across Europe are feeling the effects of it too. Add to that the uncertainties surrounding the geopolitical picture with the wars that are taking place across the world. It all means that there is just so much uncertainty which will be passed on to consumers, with food insecurity and prices invariably rising. That's something experts say is no doubt coming down the line.
I'm not concerned we'll run out of food anytime soon. What is more concerning is the price of foods. So when we have any kind of climate-related yield shock, or any yield shock per se, then prices usually go up, so food will be more expensive. At the moment, we have fairly high yield shocks, up to even 20%.
Temperatures are rising faster across the European continent than anywhere else in the world. And here in the UK, the next few weeks will continue to be hot and dry, meaning even more uncertainty for Franz and farmers like him. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in West Sussex.
Well, coming up, we're going to get more on Andy Burnham's cost of living tour and just how big the challenge he's facing is.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
So, as we've been reporting, Andy Burnham will travel across the country this summer to talk to people about their cost of living concerns. But there are questions over just how much can be done with the problem as deep-rooted and widespread as it is. Well, let's speak now to Peter Matijek from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which helps elevate people from poverty. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. Do you welcome Andy Burnham touring the country, listening to people and focusing on the issue of the cost of living? Is it helpful, do you think?
Definitely, and it's one of the top issues that people want to talk about. So 9 in 10 people, when asked by the ONS, what are the big issues facing the country today, say the cost of living. So, yeah, it's really important. And we think that the policies announced are a good start, but we need to go further.
Well, yes, and we'll talk about his policies in a moment. But first of all, what kind of message do you think he'll hear from people? Give us a sense from your research of how bad things are when it comes to the cost of living.
Yeah, so what we see is people are stuck in kind of a holding pattern where they're not able to invest in their future, not able to sort of make those positive steps to get on in life, and therefore it's more susceptible to the next shock. And what we see in our statistics, for instance, at the bottom end of the income distribution is 7.4 million people going about essentials, one of a list of essentials, and that's what he'll hear really, is some people struggling to make ends meet, some people struggling just to make investments in themselves and their skills and stuff like that. So I think it's good to listen, but it's also important to act. And I think what we need is action at a kind of sufficient scale so people actually feel the difference.
Well, yes, and so given that, looking at the range of announcements he's made, the £2 bus fare cap, the scrapping VAT on electricity bills, he's also given a 20% cut on business rates to pubs, for example. He says he wants to give people breathing space, but how much difference do you think measures like that will make?
Yeah, so I think they're all helpful if they apply to you. I think what we need to think about is kind of the depth and breadth of these measures. So, for instance, there are things that he could do more broadly in the energy market in terms of an affordable energy guarantee, or maybe rent controls, things that people will actually, see across the piece that will start to unblock people's lives and start to make people feel better and make those kind of positive decisions, which also will hopefully help grow the economy and get people's incomes rising as well.
And how much room for manoeuvre does he have? I mean, we're told a lot about how little money there is in government to spend. And also, there are factors outside his control. We've just been hearing about how food prices may go up because of this record hot weather we've been having. And the Iran war is also affecting inflation more broadly. So how much room for manoeuvre does he have?
Yeah, so I think he'll have to get creative, but there are things that he can do in terms of the tax system, in terms of levelling up tax on investments compared to labour market. That's one way of raising incomes. But one of the things that we've seen is that if no action is taken, people's incomes in 2029 will be lower than in 2019, and that's not a kind of sustainable pattern for people or for a government. So action needs to be taken, and I think to listen and see what's actually out there and what people have got suggestions about is really important, but then it's actually making those suggestions happen and seeing what can happen in the budget in October.
And he's made some bigger promises, hasn't he? He's promised to end rough sleeping, for example. He's also ended to fix social care and boost social housing as well, council house building. So what difference will those measures make? And are you confident that he can actually deliver them?
We're really hopeful that change can happen. We've got record levels of destitution in this country, so it's really important that that curve is lowered, hopefully ending the need for food banks, ending the need for rough sleeping. That's really important. I think, we really support action in this area.
Opposition parties are saying that a lot of the problems are the government's own fault and previous decisions that they've made. They point to the rise in the minimum wage as well as taxes on businesses being a real problem because it's affecting hiring, for example, and they say businesses are struggling as a result as well. Do you think they have a point there?
Not really. I think basically what you've got to think about is what do people feel and how do they sort of break this cycle of feeling stuck in their lives. And I suppose that seems to be the theme that the cost of living is behind, and that's what we want action on. And I think that's the important thing, is to actually think about people's lives and how these can be improved. And I think that's what we call for the emphasis of the government to be on.
Well, Peter Matterjake, we really appreciate your thoughts this morning from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look now at what the weather's doing.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, it'll be hotter this week, although cooler today, with heatwave conditions returning. So the morning looks quite sunny and dry for most of us, but northern Scotland will see a few coastal showers, mainly in the breezy northeast. Temperatures will be near average in the north, significantly higher in the south, but it won't be as hot as yesterday. And the afternoon will bring little change, although the far southeast may catch an isolated shower. It'll stay mainly dry and clear overnight, although cloudier over northern Scotland and southwest of Ireland, with temperatures widely above average.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Now, just over a week ago, President Trump hailed a breakthrough in the move towards a long-term settlement to rebuild Gaza, involving a commitment from Hamas to disarm. Well, those hopes are now in tatters after Israel's Prime Minister rejected the US President's 15-point plan for Gaza, stating that no military withdrawal will occur until Hamas is genuinely disarmed. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that Israel will stand its ground on the issue, even against its closest friends.
Now we are talking with the Americans about this issue. They have ideas, some of which are acceptable to us and some are not. We know how to stand up to these things. We have proven it in the past, and we are proving it today as well.
Well, our correspondent Tom Cheshire has the latest now from Jerusalem.
10 days ago, we had this announcement from the US-led Board of Peace, hailing it as a historic breakthrough. We hadn't heard from Israel until that time. And then the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, rejecting it in the strongest possible terms, talking about unacceptable things and acceptable things. The big sticking point, the one that he talked straight away about, was the disarmament of Hamas. Now, again, this shows some of the messiness in this. In that original document 10 days ago, that was billed as a phased withdrawal. So Hamas would disarm gradually and Israel would withdraw gradually from Gaza. They then put a post out on X claiming to correct inaccuracies, saying actually what would happen is that Hamas would fully disarm before Israel went back from the yellow line. That is the line that they control in Gaza. Netanyahu today going back and rejecting the whole plan in its entirety on that basis. And it's also worth bearing in mind that, it is a ceasefire, but Israel has continued to control much of Gaza. It continues to carry out airstrikes. More than 1,250 people have been killed since that ceasefire came into effect. The other part of this, which is sort of alluded to but not mentioned, when he's talking about acceptable things and unacceptable things, one of the other parts of the peace process, it's not sort of specifically spelled out, but it's understood, the meaning of it, is that part of this is a framework to Palestinian statehood, Palestinian self-determination. Netanyahu was very, very clear today. He said, while I'm Prime Minister, there will be no Palestinian statehood in Gaza or in the West Bank. When I'm Prime Minister is a really important part of that as well, because obviously elections are coming up here in Israel in October. He's under pressure not really to give any ground there. And I think that's why this statement has been so strong. We know there's lots happening behind the scenes. We know the personal relationship between Netanyahu and President Trump is really, really important. But he was very clear saying, I don't mind going against my friends in this. This is position. Will not be giving an inch on this. We've heard from his supporters who have sort of, especially on the far right of the political spectrum, who have absolutely endorsed that position. And it's, Gaza in itself is really a really tricky issue. There's been 2 years of fighting, of course, after the October 7th attack. So it is such a live and contentious issue, and one that pretty much every leader wants to look strong on. The other part of this, of course, is Hamas. So they have agreed to this roadmap. That was part of why they called it a historic breakthrough on the US side. They say they are still committed to it, and they want the US to press Israel on this. And again, that question of statehood, I mean, the terms of this deal is that Hamas fully disarms, fully gives up control. It is no longer an entity in Gaza. Without having statehood for Palestine on the table, will they do it? This really takes it all the way back to square one.
Coming up next, we're going to be discussing stories making the headlines in today's papers once again with our reviewer from The Independent, Millie Cook.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back! The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Were you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Thing about being a Sky News presenter.
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
So time for another look at the morning papers. Here with me is political correspondent at The Independent, Millie Cook. Welcome back. Lots around. The Telegraph has taken your interest, and it's a story that we've been covering this morning. And this is Andy Burnham about to set off on his nationwide tour to listen to people about their cost of living concerns. And at the same time, we've had another of these announcements that the government's been trickling out since he came into office, designed to give people a breathing space on the cost of living.
Yeah.
So talk us through this one.
So, exactly, this is part of Andy Burnham's mission to show that he's going to make life easier for people. So he has been trying to show that since
as soon as he started in office, that he's already unveiling policies to directly impact people's day-to-day lives. This one is about hard-to-cancel online subscriptions. So when you sign up for something, whether it's accidentally not realising it was a rolling subscription, it's sort of any hidden fees, things that are hard to cancel, so you suddenly find yourself being charged $4.99 a month and aren't sure how to get out of it.
Prices go up when you didn't realise.
Yeah, it's sort of dodgy free trials where you're not sure quite what happens after the free trial ends. He's introducing new regulation to make sure that it's harder to put in place kind of hard to cancel online subscriptions or any subscriptions that you're not fully sure what you're getting. So increased transparency and just making it easier for consumers. There's a stat in here that says that these regulations could save an average of £14 a month for every unwanted subscription. So it's just kind of a lot of small things adding up to make sure that people have a little bit more money to spend. And it's, as Andy Burnham said, it was to try to give people a bit more breathing space. It's part of a wider swathe of policies, but the one question that he's having to kind of answer here is how much things will cost, how he'll pay for policies. There are a few VAT breaks on energy bills. He's doing a number of policies that are all kind of piecemeal, but there are concerns that they might add up and questions over how he's going to pay for them.
That's right, and the Tories as well pointing out, and in fact the government admitting that this is something that was announced by Keir Starmer and it's being brought forward.
Yeah.
It's being brought forward by 3 months, but the industry minister that I spoke to defended that, saying we're being transparent about that, but we're just trying to make life easier for people. And it may not look like a lot of money, but we're hoping that all these different policies do add up and make a difference when people are struggling.
I think also bringing the policy forward sums up Andy Burnham's mission to show that he's not complacent and that he's moving quickly. So even though it wasn't necessarily his policy, the thing that he's trying to remedy here is this allegation of complacency under Starmer's government. He's trying to show that he will actually move very quickly to make sure that things are in place and people feel the impact.
But as you say, questions over how it's going to be paid for, but also the bigger promises he's made with the bigger bills, like fixing social care, you know, and stopping rough sleeping and building more council homes. Those big decisions are going to be around the corner, aren't they, in terms of how they're going to be financed. So it'll be an interesting budget, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that brings us on to the next story about care homes, really, doesn't it?
Very neat. Yeah, that's in the Eye, and this is about the number that aren't doing what they should do.
Yeah, and so this story is effectively saying that a fifth of adult care homes have been rated either inadequate or requiring improvement by the Care Quality Commission. And it links into Andy Burnham's flagship promise, which is to create a national care service. And as you said before, it's a hugely expensive pledge, and it's also a massive practical mission. He'll have a huge amount to get through. I mean, at the moment, this just sums up the state of Britain's care system. A huge number of them are failing, and then the other problem facing people is the cost. People are paying a huge amount of money, lots of people having to sell their homes to pay for care, and they're paying for care that clearly isn't particularly high quality. So Andy Burnham has a massive problem at his hands, and at the moment it's not clear exactly how much it will cost, and once we have got those figures, we're not really clear on where he's going to get that money. And he's been clear that that will come down the line, that everything will be fully funded. But at the moment, Britain's public finances, they're already very stretched.
Well, yes, and successive governments have attempted to tackle this issue and have come unstuck by it. He wants to go down the consensus route, doesn't he? He's invited other parties for talks on this issue, which might be his only way of getting it over the line, is making sure that he's got that political backing. But as you say, it might make for some uncomfortable policies because the money is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's made a bold promise to fix it, and he's doing it early to make sure that he's got time. So I think he's argued that one of the problems that previous administrations have faced is they've tried to fix social care too close to an election. So he's hoping that he can start the process now, he can spend some political capital on it, making those difficult decisions, and then he's got enough time before a general election in order to let those decisions sort of settle and for people to accept them before the public goes to the polls. But it will be a very, very difficult pursuit, I think.
Let's move on to another issue that he has talked a lot about. He keeps referencing high rail fares, doesn't he? Now the Daily Mail has an article talking about some of the other issues on the railways. They're suggesting that, the headline at least says, half of trains ran late after the line was renationalised by Labour.
Yeah, so the Mail has some figures, I believe, through Freedom of Information requests, looking at the number of late trains on the first rail line that's been nationalised. And this story effectively casts doubt over whether or not nationalisation is a good idea. It's sort of the kind of top line of this story. It's South Western Railway, and late trains surged from 34% to 46%. There is also a quote in there from Department of Transport saying that the analysis is misleading and that the time periods are kind of different periods in the year. So one, they were comparing a busier period where there are more delays to a quieter period. So there is a bit of a health warning with it. But I think that, the key thing here is that nationalisation isn't a silver bullet to fix Britain's railways, and it will be a long process. And I think the government will be battling a lot of stories like this when it comes to nationalisation. There will be a teething period. I don't necessarily think that means that nationalisation is a terrible idea, but I think that it shows that Britain's railways are in a really difficult state. Rail fares are really high. And if they want to bring down rail costs and make sure that we've got fewer delays, it won't be an overnight fix. It will take a lot of work.
Complications down the line, you could say. Let's move on to the Telegraph, and they have a story about cancer risks and the effect of exercise.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's showing, I think the story's arguing that just 15 minutes less of physical activity could negatively affect your health and make cancer more likely. It shows just how sort of marginal it is when it comes to daily exercise and how much exercise you need to take. And one of the lines in the story says that effectively people who are already exercising should be careful not to let that exercise drop. And if it does drop by even just sort of 10 to 15 minutes a day, that can quite rapidly negatively impact your health, which I found quite fascinating because I didn't think that your body's responded like that.
Amounts would make such a difference. Does it give an idea of what the ideal amount is that we shouldn't drop below?
So it's more actually about, this story I was actually wondering that, but it speaks a lot more to sort of swapping. The study was looking at sort of reducing exercise or increasing it and how much that kind of marginal change affects your body. So this one has replacing 15 minutes of sleep or sedentary behaviour with 15 minutes of movement was linked to a 2% reduced risk of cancer. Conversely, swapping 30 minutes of movement for 30 minutes of sedentary behaviour increased the risk by 8%. So it kind of looks at how you could change your lifestyle behaviours to reduce or increase your risk of health complications, which, doesn't seem like a huge amount. So I guess the positive news is it's an easy swap to make if you do want to start exercising more. But
but it's difficult, isn't it? Because we get so many studies and so many messages about the risks. I guess what most people just take away from seeing a headline like that is you just have to keep exercising.
Yeah.
Don't stop if it's good for your health. But there are lots of confusing messages that we do get about the best ways to keep healthy.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I found the stat about sleep quite interesting because obviously we hear a lot about how lack of sleep can also cause cancer. And so I've always sort of thought more sleep is better because we're all living lives where we don't get enough sleep. But actually, some of this here is saying that swapping 30 minutes of sleep might be better, might be worse if you end up not exercising. So it's an interesting trade-off. How much sleep do you need? How much exercise do you need? And what's the best approach?
I definitely need more sleep. I'm just going to make that statement now.
So do I.
Let's move on to a story in the Daily Mail about this controversial guy, Jason Arday, who was a Cambridge professor, and he's had a book coming out. Explain us a little bit about the details of this.
Yeah, so it's quite a wild story, to be honest. He's a lauded Cambridge professor, he was a Cambridge professor, who was the youngest black professor appointed at Cambridge. There were lots of media reporting about alleged plagiarism and accusing him of making up facts about his life. He obviously would deny that and say that he's sort of telling the truth. He's got a book coming out where he details a lot of these. He recently left his post saying that it wasn't worth having to face that amount of media scrutiny. When the claims first started coming out, there was a lot of allegations of sort of a witch hunt, and the argument that black professors and black people in public life are held to much higher standards than their white counterparts. And I think that's definitely a wider argument, and it's a wider point to be made. But I think in this situation, a lot of people are now arguing that this pushes the boundaries beyond that, and it's a separate issue given how many of his claims have now been fact-checked. So this story is about him cancelling a few events in his book tour. So he was meant to be speaking, I believe, in Edinburgh about his memoir, but he's pulled out, saying of his own choice, just saying, I think after the amount of scrutiny, I think he's decided to withdraw from public life, because I imagine it has been quite a difficult few weeks for him.
Yes, indeed. Well, Millie, we really appreciate you taking us through some of the stories in the papers. Thanks very much indeed, and stay with us for all the top stories.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello, very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with me, Anna Jones. Here's how things are looking. One of the world's most wanted men, alleged crime boss Daniel Kinahan, is charged in Dublin after being extradited from Dubai. Andy Burnham's summer roadshow begins this week, hearing from those across the country about their cost of living concerns. A British couple jailed in Iran accused of spying end their hunger strike after nearly 3 months. We'll be speaking to their son a little later. Also today, we'll tell you about how Thames Water paid a £1 million fee to an executive despite being on the brink of collapse. Also, Bentleys and BMWs are amongst the supercars seized in a crackdown on antisocial driving. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us. So, one of the world's most wanted men, suspected crime boss Daniel Kinahan, is this morning behind bars in Ireland after being extradited from Dubai. The 49-year-old built a boxing empire while in exile, but now faces trial, charged with directing organised crime. Well, the Kinahan cartel is accused of importing tons of drugs and firearms around the world and has been linked to more than a dozen gangland murders. Our Ireland correspondent, Stephen Murphy, has the story.
Touchdown for Ireland's most wanted man. A government jet brings the alleged crime boss Daniel Kinahan back to Dublin after his battle against extradition from Dubai failed. It's his first visit home for a decade. In an intense security operation, the 49-year-old was taken to the non-jury Special Criminal Court. In a brief hearing, he was charged with directing the activities of an organised crime group. Kinahan's return being hailed as a significant day for Irish law enforcement.
I want to pay very strong tribute to An Garda Síochána, to the Garda Commissioner, in terms of the Gardaí's success in tackling organised crime in a very effective way. And also I pay tribute to the authorities in the United Arab Emirates for the strong cooperation with Ireland over recent years.
A boxing weigh-in at a Dublin hotel 10 years ago changed everything. A hit squad, some disguised as armed police, attacked the event with assault rifles, hunting for Daniel Kinahan. He escaped, but one of his associates, David Byrne, was shot dead.
It was the worst criminal outrage probably in criminal history in Ireland. People going around with Kalashnikovs trying to kill rival gang members in the middle of the day and trying to evade justice. That was never seen at that level before.
The hotel attack accelerated a feud with the rival Hutch gang, which left 18 people dead and paralysed parts of inner-city Dublin with fear.
It's very much like out of a horror movie, because it was frightening. There was armed guards on every street corner searching cars, and it was all about who was going to be shot next.
In the aftermath, Kinahan and some of his associates fled abroad, settling in Dubai. Irish police allege that while there, Kinahan continued to direct organised crime. 4 years ago, US authorities travelled to Dublin to offer a $5 million bounty on top Kinahans, including Daniel. They described the gang as one of the most dangerous in the world. Behind the scenes, there was intense work by Irish police and politicians securing a new extradition deal with the UAE. Kinahan's days in the Gulf were now numbered. Daniel Kinahan has now been remanded in custody, thought to be at Ireland's only maximum security prison in Portlaoise. He knows his legal battle will be tough. "I think we know I won't get bail, but thanks for explaining," he told the court. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
Now, new Prime Minister Andy Burnham's summer cost of living road trip begins this week as he asks those across the country how the government can better their lives. So it'll include a crackdown on so-called subscription traps to help against rising bills. That was the announcement today. So Rob's here to tell us more. So tell us a little bit about this tour and what he's trying to achieve, you think?
Yeah, I mean, part of this is keeping the focus on cost of living. That's been the sort of priority number one for Andy Burnham and the whole government, really, in this first 3 to 4 weeks of him being in office. So he wants to lay out new measures, which he says will be everyday fixes. So part of it is putting out new policies, putting out things that he said will affect change. Today, he's talking about subscription traps where you sign up for something and then the price ends up doubling 4 weeks down the way, but you're already tied in. Now, the rules to change these, to give people kind of more information about them, more transparency about them, to allow people to get out of them before the price goes up, they were already coming in. All Andy Burnham's doing here is basically bringing forward when they're going to be implemented from spring next year to January next year. So, you know, it's not a massive thing in pure policy terms. In terms of the summer tour as it's being billed, it'll get underway later this week and Number 10 say will last for much of the rest of August. That's being billed as an opportunity for Andy Burnham to kind of get the first-hand experiences of people across the country, of shop owners, business owners, workers, and use that to inform his 10-year plan for the country that will come later this year. Look, I think a Prime Minister kind of getting out of Westminster and speaking to voters is always going to be valuable. That said, Number 10 is probably overflowing with polling data and focus group data to tell them exactly about the priorities that people have and what they want addressing. And that, the fact that they're focusing on cost of living here shows me that they already have their priorities pretty straight about what is affecting people. So I think part of this as well is being seen to be listening. And Andy Burnham's pretty good at this sort of stuff. He's pretty good at those kind of natural interactions on the street. We've seen him do it before. He did it in Cardiff, I think, in the first few days after he was elected Labour leader, I think it was. And he's got a pretty kind of savvy comms operation around him as well that are able to transmit that.
Yeah, but I guess the question is whether people will be satisfied with what they've heard so far. A series of measures, but admittedly the government will say they're not big in and of themselves. They're hoping that cumulatively they'll make a difference. Or whether people think, I need something bigger, I need a bigger change to be satisfied.
Well, I mean, the polling suggests that it's gone about as well as it probably could. We have seen a bit of a Burnham bounce. It's not a kind of huge turnaround, but we have certainly seen his favourability ratings are good. Labour has been level pegging with Reform, even ahead of Reform in some polls. Reform still ahead of Labour in others. So I think this is the sort of setting the scene part of the Premiership. It's about sort of introducing the government and Andy Burnham to the country and telling them what their priorities are. But look, he was elected promising to rip up 40 years of economic and political orthodoxy. So far, we haven't really seen the detail in which he's going to achieve that. I think the moment where that gets real, where we will be expecting something that will really, really tangibly impact people's lives on a much wider scale, is probably the budget in the end of October.
Yeah, so a bit of a wait for that. In the meantime, I just want to ask you a little bit about the early prisoner release scheme, exemptions to which Andy Burnham announced last week. There has been a backlash because the killers, two of the killers at least, of PC Andrew Harper are set for early release. So what have we learnt about what the options are for the government, and are they likely to change anything?
Yeah, this is potentially one of the issues that sort of could blow Number 10's plans for the coming weeks off course. There has been mixed messaging coming out in the form of kind of off-the-record briefing appearing in newspapers over the last few days around what Number 10 is going to do about this, whether it can find a way to basically exempt these two people that were convicted of the killing of PC Andrew Harper, whether they can be blocked from being released from prison. You, of course, asked the Minister that question directly this morning, and let's have a listen to what he had to say.
I don't think anybody in the country wants to see PC Harper's killers on the streets. But I think we also have to face up to the situation that we're in, which is a desperate shortage of prison capacity. The previous government managed to close a whole load of prisons and only add on 500 places in 14 years. We've added on thousands more police cells since we came, prison cells rather, since we came into power. We're adding thousands more on between now and 2030.
So what do you make of that answer, Rob?
I think you can read into it that there's clearly a degree of political will in government to try and find a way to keep these two individuals from being released. The difficulty is that how that butts up against the practical reality of doing that. Because they were sentenced before the law that came in, known as Harper's Law, a specific offence for killing emergency workers, the difficulty they might face is that if you single them out, then do you have to keep in anyone else that was convicted of manslaughter as well? And if you do, is there some sort of legal challenge that can be mounted against that? Or do you run into problems with prison overcrowding? The whole point of this early release scheme is because prisons are massively overcrowded and under pressure. And if you keep sort of moving the line and including more and more people that will be staying in, because remember, he's already exempted people connected to grooming
that
offences.
pinch point quicker.
And Andy Burnham had said last week that basically, or the week before, I think it was, that he'd push this as far as he possibly could, given the prison capacity problems. But look, it's a difficult one, and it's one that I think will follow him out on his summer tour this week.
Yeah, and Opposition Marcy's still wanting to talk about it as well. Yeah. Rob, thanks very much indeed. So Andy Burnham will also use his tour to focus on reviving high street retailers. But if he's going to be successful, he'll have to battle long-term shopping trends and some of the economic policies of his predecessor. Our correspondent Charlotte Leeming reports from Wakefield.
Back in the 1980s, Wakefield's High Street was booming, with the opening of the Riding's shopping centre, The Jewel in the Crown. Described as the next Harrods, people flocked here to spend their money. But times have changed. Many shops have now shut or moved out of town. The precinct's been slated for future closure and possible demolition for redevelopment. But new Prime Minister Andy Burnham says he wants to bring back hope to the high street and tackle the cost of living. Going on tour to meet people and hear their problems. So are they as hopeful as he is?
It's a real struggle. Me and my wife work, and we work 40 hours a week, and you're still struggling to pay your bills then. So, yeah, I think people that are on minimum wage and things are really finding it really difficult.
Put more things on to try and, like, revamp this area a bit and, you know, you put more focus on some of the historic buildings because some area of Wakefield are really nice. We just kind of get drowned out by a lot of the other not-so-nice buildings.
They're on about pulling ridings down. There's all them shops in there. Where are they going to go? Pulling the flats down at the back of it. No, it's not good enough, is it?
Sofa store manager Mark Watson says high streets up and down the country desperately need support to survive, particularly with the rise in business costs and a reduction in footfall.
Like I say, the high street isn't dead. It just needs sort of rejuvenating, and obviously they're talking about redeveloping the ridings, perhaps pulling it down. That isn't the answer. For us, we know some of the larger retailers are coming out of the ridings, which will leave obviously some of your smaller independents sort of in limbo without the attraction of the bigger units to pull people in here. So what's going to happen?
Andy Burnham has said it's his mission to help ease the financial pressure on people. He's already set out measures to cap bus fares and to reduce the cost of energy. But the Conservatives are asking him to explain in detail how he actually plans to fund all of these initiatives.
Lovely to meet you. Nice to meet you.
The PM's heading out for community conversations, but it's his actions, not words, he's going to be judged on. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Wakefield.
Now, in developing news this morning, Sky News has learned that the financially stricken Thames Water handed a £1 million sign-on fee to its finance chief. That's despite teetering on the brink of collapse. The seven-figure payment was made last month to Steve Buck, who joined the company in April last year. The money is understood to have been drawn from an emergency borrowing facility. Well, earlier I asked the Business and Health Minister, Chris McDonald, about just this.
I don't want to see executives rewarded for failure. I think what we've seen from Thames Water over recent weeks and months are, increasingly sort of desperate attempts to try and get their business in order. But really, I don't think the customers of Thames Water are very happy about that. And I think all of us, when we look at both, water quality and water supply, we're concerned as well. And that's why the government's, taking action. We're building 9 reservoirs. It'll be the first reservoirs that we've built in this country for decades, and that's why we're suffering these shortages of water.
Now, the Ministry of Defence says no sensitive data has been compromised after it was revealed that cameras on Royal Navy drones were connected to a system in China. Cameras on the Navy's K3 Scout surveillance drone were found to be sending so-called heartbeat communications to a device in China. The Ministry of Defence said the transmissions had been found during a routine assessment, but said no data had been compromised. Now, a British couple jailed in Iran after being accused of spying have ended their hunger strike after nearly 3 months. Craig and Lindsay Foreman were arrested in January last year while passing through Iran on a motorcycle journey from Europe to Australia. They were sentenced to 10 years in prison and both adamantly deny the spying charges. Well, let's bring in Anjem Bakos, who's here and has been looking at this story. Morning to you, Anjem. Why did this couple decide to go on a hunger strike, and talk us through the decision to end it as well?
So they've been on this hunger strike, not just for themselves, as a form of protest. And the initial idea for the hunger strike followed a protest which took place. And they're actually on a hunger strike to protest against the treatment of their own detained ship in the prison in Tehran, and alongside all of the other prisoners that are being detained in Iran. And this particular prison has been flagged by human rights organisations for mistreating their prisoners. So they're not just advocating for themselves, but this hunger strike, it's much broader than that. And during the last 5 days, there have been other people who have been involved in the hunger strike as well, including their son, who's also joined in solidarity for their situation and those prisoners who are being detained in this particular prison in Tehran. And their son has also been vehemently advocating here, consistently pleading for their release with the Iranian authorities. And previously, the Iranian authorities had said that they would be released, but that has since dissipated and kind of disappeared into the ether. And now Joe Bennett, who I'm sure we'll be speaking to later on, has also been speaking to MPs here who were involved in that process in negotiating the release of his parents. And although the hunger strike has ended after nearly 3 months, the family and the campaigners are very determined in making everybody aware that actually this process of trying to get them released has not ended here. The conversation is going to continue. They're going to be speaking to various ministers here in an attempt to secure the release of the parents. And they have already had conversations with their MP, Tony Vaughan, Casey, and also the new Minister for the Middle East, Stephen Doherty. And they've said that the conversations have been both positive and constructive, but now they're waiting to see whether any of these conversations will form into some kind of affirmative action to secure the release of these two in Iran.
And in the meantime, do we know how they're doing?
So they've had some quite challenging circumstances in this prison. The prison is also obviously quite a hostile environment anyway. We know that Lindsay was in a period of solitary confinement for an extended period of 57 days. We also know that they didn't have any contact with family for 7 months, which obviously for the family must be so incredibly distressing. So it's been incredibly challenging circumstances, and the prison itself has been known to kind of be in kind of breach of human rights, essentially, and has been flagged with human rights organisations.
So, yeah, very unpleasant place for them to be. As you say, we're going to be talking to Joe Bennett a little bit later on, so we'll hear from him how they are doing and the latest on his push to get them out. Thanks very much indeed, Anjan. Now, more than £8 million worth of vehicles have been seized by the Metropolitan Police in a crackdown on supercars in central London. So 90 cars were impounded over the weekend in an operation targeting uninsured, antisocial and dangerous drivers. These included Bentleys, BMWs, Lamborghinis, as well as an uninsured Ferrari worth £3.7 million. So it's the highest number and value of cars seized in the operation's 5-year history.
So this time of the year we have an influx of foreign registered vehicles where their countries are too hot. They come to London for, a month, 2 months at a time, and they bring their what we class as supercars with them. Whilst we like them to come to London, some of them do cause issues with their driving, the revving of the engines, the speeding, the popping of the engines, and generally just cause a nuisance to members of the public that are trying to enjoy central London.
I didn't know cars could cost that much. Anyway, how naive am I? Coming up, I'm going to be speaking to Helen Morgan from the Liberal Democrats. That's coming up next.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Let me just bring you a little bit of breaking news regarding the pressure building on Gianni Infantino, the boss of FIFA. Just in the last few minutes, we're getting statements out of a combination of UEFA, AFC and CONCACAF, representing different parts of the world, of course, saying that Gianni Infantino has placed himself above the collective with World Cup stake sale proposal. This is the proposal that Gianni Infantino put forward to sell off stakes in the World Cup to private investors, which prompted a huge backlash, and he then had to withdraw that plan. They go on to say, these groups of bodies, UEFA, AFC and CONCACAF, to say that FIFA did not acknowledge that the proposal itself was inherently wrong, and they are calling for a fully independent third-party review of the World Cup stake sale proposal. So these bodies, these football bodies from around the world, are calling for a review of that proposal, and also saying that he placed himself above the collective, Gianni Infantino, with that proposal at the time. Those lines still coming into us, so I'll keep an eye out in case we get more on that, but that's what has been said so far in the last few moments. Right now, though, it's time to speak to the Liberal Democrats. Here with me this morning is Helen Morgan, who's the Liberal Democrat Health and Social Care spokesperson. So very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. I want to come on to the issue of social care a little bit later on. But first, I just want to get your take on Andy Burnham launching a summer tour, we're told, later on this week, where he'll be going around the country, listening to people and their concerns, particularly about the cost of living. But what do you make of that? Is that a good idea?
Well, it's always good to listen to people, isn't it? But I do have a concern that he needs to do that. One would hope that his MPs have been listening to their constituents ever since they were elected and would be able to give him a pretty strong steer on what the cost of living pressures were facing people in their area. Where I live, people are concerned about their energy bills, they're concerned about their food bills. So while the consumer protections that he's sort of trailed this morning are welcome, I don't think they're going to make a real difference to people who are struggling to make ends meet. Well, yes, although talking to the government this morning, they will acknowledge that while the stopping subscription traps that you were referring to there, a proposal that's already been announced, but they're bringing it forward. They acknowledge that things like that are quite small in and of themselves, but overall they add up and that people need all the help they can get. They're talking about breathing space for now, while bigger policies are perhaps developed for later. Well, as I say, those consumer protections are welcome. Liberal Democrats have long called for increased consumer protection across a wide range of measures, but we really do think that those discounted energy bills are going to be important because the price cap is going up, as we know, as a result of Trump's war in Iran, and we need to make sure that people can afford to keep their homes warm in the winter. Seems a bit strange to be talking about it in the middle of a heat wave, but you know, right, those bills will come in soon. And they will go up, yeah. So, whatever he's doing, it seems to be working for the time being. He's enjoyed a little bit of a bounce in the polls so far in his few weeks in office. But what about your own polling figures? Because you look like you're about the same level as 2024, I'm not looking that far back to the last century, as 2024. Some polls in the last few months have actually put you lower than that, but you've got a record number of MPs. But you're not advancing as a party, are you? Is that a disappointment? Well, I think we're doing well in real ballots where actual people go to ballot boxes and cast votes. We've done really well in the local elections. We're confident in doing well next May. So when people have physically gone and cast a vote, we have delivered the results. And we've had a real impact on policy with 72 MPs in Parliament. So I think we're doing well. We do sometimes struggle to get to be heard, particularly on social media, when the algorithms drive controversial, unworkable stories to prominence. And we're here to talk about fixing the real problems that this country faces, whether that's the cost of living, whether that's patient safety in the NHS. We're going to focus on those real issues that will make life better to people.
You've talked about your performance in elections, and one of your strategies seems to have been saying, we're not the Tories, we're not Reform. You want, tactical voting to get on side for you, and that's worked to you to a certain extent. But are you not being bold enough about what you yourselves stand for, rather than pushing yourself out there as not one of those other parties?
I think we've been very bold. We've been very clear on Donald Trump and the way that he's treated the UK. We've been very clear on a defence strategy. We're the only party really talking about the NHS and what needs to be done to change the way that it works. We've been bold on Europe. We've been bold on the water companies. Across a whole range of policy areas, we have led the way in making the big calls that will change people's lives for the better. And I think that's the right thing to do.
We've got parties like the Greens have seen a jump in popularity. We've got Reform as well. Is the problem now that you're being seen as one of the mainstream parties, and these parties that are seen as rising parties, new parties, are seen as the exciting ones to turn to?
Well, I think we're seeing a fall in support for both of them since the heights that they reached last year, actually. The Greens' polling is falling away, as is Reform's. But that's been largely driven by populist, simplistic claims that do well on social media. We're not a populist party. We're here to offer real, workable solutions for people. So we need to keep making sure people understand what we're about, absolutely. But we have been bold. We are delivering at the ballot box when it matters. And when people have Lib Dems representing them locally, they tend to re-elect them. We're strong in areas where we've proved that we can do the job, and we are confident that we can expand those areas and keep getting Liberal Democrats elected.
You talk about bold and workable policy. Ed Davey, though, has got a name for his stunts, hasn't he? We've got conference seasons coming up. Will we see more stunts from Ed Davey? Is that going to be his approach again this year?
Well, I think whatever Ed's doing is kept firmly under wraps so that it's a surprise on the day. But what you will see is a really in-depth discussion about the policies that are necessary to make the things work in this country that are broken, whether that's the NHS, the cost of living, defence. You'll see a really, really good conference with proper policy discussion.
Quick word on social care, because Andy Burnham has made a commitment to fix it. He's also talked about, getting other parties on side. What is your view, if you do enter into those talks with the government? What's your take on how social care should be paid for? Well, first of all, it needs a cross-party consensus. I think there's been 22 attempts to fix social care over the last decade or so, and we need the 23rd one to be successful. You talk about bold policies. We've been the leading party on social care, calling for a fix to it for a long time now. But we do need to build consensus. We think it can be done without raising taxes, and we think there are three clear tests that need to be met. So the first is proper support for unpaid carers. That's guaranteed respite care and reform of the carers allowance, which disincentivises and prevents many unpaid carers from going back into work. We want to see free personal care, which is a basic right for people in the way that it's delivered in Scotland, for example. And we want to see no one face catastrophic costs at the end of their life to pay for their own care, which is the case at the moment. But do you think that people with high levels of assets should be contributing towards the bill?
Well, I think we need to build a cross-party consensus on how we pay for it. Clearly, we could come up with a solution and all the other parties could say, no, we don't agree with that, and then this has failed. But we do think there's a huge amount of waste in the NHS. We think we need to be able to do things differently so that we free up funding to pay for social care. So getting unpaid carers back into work, for example, will free them up to do the care. It will contribute to their tax, the tax that they pay if they're working, and they'll be drawing potentially less in benefit. So all sorts of different ways we can do it, but we can't commit to a single mechanism at the moment because we need to have that cross-party consensus.
But are you a bit wary about wealth taxes and taxes on people's assets, given that you now do have, you've got a lot of seats in wealthy southern constituencies? You might be concerned about wealth taxes. Does that make you a bit more squeamish about going down that road?
I don't think that's the reason why we would be squeamish, but clearly wealth taxes have been ineffective where they've been introduced in other countries. So we're not keen on that idea of a wealth tax, whatever that might be and however that might be framed. We don't think that's right. It doesn't have to do with the kind of constituencies that we represent. My constituency isn't an affluent one, for a start off. It's full of ordinary working people, many of whom are facing catastrophic costs at the end of their life to pay for their own care. But we do need to build a consensus. Otherwise, the 23rd attempt to fix social care will fail like the previous 22 have.
OK, well, Helen Morgan, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, coming up, we're going to be speaking to Joe Bennett, who's the son of the British couple jailed in Iran, Craig and Lindsay Foreman. That's coming up next. Let's get more now on a story we've been following for a long time. The British couple Craig and Lindsay Foreman jailed in Iran after being accused of spying. Well, they've ended their hunger strike now after nearly 3 months. And to remind you, they were arrested in January last year while passing through Iran on a motorbike journey from Europe to Australia. And they were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Both adamantly deny the spying charges against them. Well, I'm pleased to say that we're joined now by their son, Joe Bennett. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in.
No problem.
So remind us why your parents decided to go on the hunger strike and why they've now called that strike off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, originally it was for the injustice that not only they are facing, but what they've seen happening to other people, the people of Iran and the people that they've shared in the prison with. you know, it was an act of defiance. It's their only agency to rebel, essentially, you know, and their concerns spread further than themselves, and I think that speaks volumes. But as a family, you know, we've been trying to get messages in them for months, begging them to come off, to be honest with you, because it was a real worry for us all, especially the length of time that had passed. And we got a message through that, you know, that we would join them in a 5-day fast towards the end of their hunger strike, which we've now completed, and that they would end their hunger strike, which I can confirm has happened. They ate yesterday. But they embodied, you know, not the suffering of just themselves, but of everybody else. And as I say, I think that's admirable.
Tell us a little bit more about how that was. You were saying that it was stressful for you, worrying about their health, being on hunger strike in this prison. How much information were you getting about how they were doing, and how difficult a time was it?
Yeah, I think that was the hardest part, is the lack of information. You know, we've had no calls with them, so you can never really check in on a daily or even weekly basis. You know, I haven't spoken to my mum for almost 3 months. So naturally you worry because of the amount of time that they were doing it, and you only get very fractured information from the inside. You know, that can be various reports from friend and family members who have prisoners, you know, people inside at Evin. So very, very worried for us, and that's why, I mean, you know, as I said, with all confidence, we know that they have eaten. Massive relief for us as a family, massive relief, because, as I say, they are now starting to look after their health.
So you've heard that they've eaten, but do you know how they are otherwise?
I know that they were struggling. The 5-day water fast at the end of their 90 days was a real hardship on their bodies. I know that my mum had very, very low blood sugar. She was in hospital. They met yesterday for about 3 hours. They ate together, and we heard after eating both of them sort of bounce back. But it's going to be a bit of an adjustment period, putting your body through so much, such an intense period of time, to now recover from that is you know, it's going to be difficult. So one thing we're really, really hoping for, and we have heard that they've managed to speak to the lawyer, is to get the phone calls back on. You know, that's one thing that was promised. We've been at a Mexican standoff, essentially, in that the prison staff were saying, we will give you your phone calls back if you come off of hunger strike, and they were saying, we won't come off of it until we get the phone calls back. So a bit of an impasse, but hopefully that has now moved on.
Yeah, because before you were able to quite regularly contact them. So when was the last time you spoke to them?
Yeah, so as I say, it's about 3 months now since my mum, and a little bit less with Craig. And they were massive lifelines for them, for us as a family. As I say, that daily check-in or every other day, it meant the world to us, because you just know in that moment they're OK. You hear stories about what happens on the inside of that prison to other inmates, and, you know, it really does worry you, because you don't know, and especially with the no contact, you don't know truly how they are, what's going on, what they're experiencing, what they're being put through. And it wreaks havoc on your mind, it really does. And the whole family, I think, has felt this sense of relief, and friends, you know, friends and family, but we've felt this sense of relief, and it's only been a day. You know, these small wins that we have along the journey, we have to celebrate.
And we should say that the end of the hunger strike doesn't mean the end of the campaign to get them released. Get us up to date with what the latest on that is. You have been speaking not just to your MP, but members of the government as well, is that
Absolutely, right? Yeah. We've got some fantastic support. As I say, Tony Vaughan, my MP, has been a real champion for putting their case to Parliament. We've recently spoken with Alistair, who is the new appointed Special Envoy.
Alistair Burt.
Alistair Burt, and Stephen Doughty, who has been appointed as the Minister for the Middle East. And what we have to look at is that change brings around opportunity. I've been saying to them that if we continue down the same path and same approach that we've taken for the last 18 months, I worry that we'll be in the same position in the next 18 months. So what we've asked for is a change of approach. We are also pushing for a meeting with Ed Miliband, the new Foreign Secretary. I think that would be a really good conversation to have, to, you know, show our frustration, but also willingness to engage. I think that's a big point, is that we want to partner with the government, we want to be as helpful as possible, but we also need to see that the right actions are being taken. And I think it will take courage. You know, it's a difficult situation, it really is, and we don't expect something to happen overnight, but what we do expect is a change in approach.
And how much more complicated does it make matters, the fact that there's ongoing conflict still in the region?
Yeah, I mean, it's not lost on us that it's a very difficult and precarious situation, but I also feel that that should heighten the risk that my parents are in. You know, there is and has been a constant risk, especially when the war was prominent and the protests before that. There's always something that, you know, could put them in harm's way. So it's not lost on us that this is difficult, but, you know, that's why it takes courage, because there will be difficult days ahead, but we have to come through them.
And am I right in saying that the UK embassy in Tehran has closed again? That must make communication harder as well.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, when that happens, it's, from a personal point of view, and I can only ever be honest, it's frustrating because, you know, they say that they're providing consular access, but when you haven't got feet on the ground, you're not able to see them, you can't give consular visits, you know, to what extent are they providing consular? You know, and that's one thing that I do get frustrated about, but naturally I'm going to, and I probably, you know, I feel I'll always be like that until they come home. That's the problem. You know, I'm probably their biggest critic. So it leads to awkward conversations sometimes, but they've got to be had, because ultimately, you know, we want my mum and Craig home. So we'll see. It's parliamentary recess at the moment, so we haven't got too much to go on there. But what we, as I say, what we do have is a new opportunity with new members of staff in Parliament. I think we've got to try and seize that.
And it feels like you're feeling a little bit of optimism, a sense that relief that your parents have come off hunger strike, but a sense with, you know, another new renewed push now. You have a little bit of hope? Yeah,
I think you've got to hold on to hope. It was very, I mean, I must admit, I got swallowed in the last 3 months because it's difficult when you're not speaking to your parents. It's very, very tough. There is hope, there's optimism, but there's also reality, and, you know, those cross over. I do believe that doing the 5-day fast has given us a reset. You know, if we embody, my mum gave us 5 words to reflect on each day, which is truth, justice, kindness, peace and unity. And I think if we embody those words and take them moving forward, only positive things can come. Very difficult and easier said than done, but yeah, I feel like we have had the reset we need. The news that come out has given us a new burst of energy because we know that they're looking after themselves properly. Well,
Joe Bennett, we really appreciate you coming in and telling us a little bit about what's going on at the moment, giving us this update, and hope you get to talk to your parents soon. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, let's stay in the Middle East. And just over a week ago, President Trump hailed a breakthrough in the move towards a long-term settlement to rebuild Gaza, involving a commitment from Hamas to disarm. Well, those hopes are now in tatters after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Donald Trump's 15-point plan for Gaza, stating that no military withdrawal will occur until Hamas is genuinely disarmed.
Now we are talking with the Americans about this issue. They have ideas, some of which are acceptable to us and some are not. We know how to stand up to these things. We have proven it in the past. And we are proving it today as well.
Well, Houthi rebels have released footage appearing to show missiles and drones being launched towards Saudi targets on the Red Sea coast of Yemen. At least 7 people were killed and 16 injured in the attack, which the Houthis claim was aimed at military forces and warehouses. The Iranian-backed group also say they attacked an oil facility in Saudi Arabia. Let's take a look now at what the weather's doing.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, it'll be hotter this week, although cooler today, with heatwave conditions returning. The morning looks quite sunny and dry for most of us, but northern Scotland will see a few coastal showers, mainly in the breezy northeast. Temperatures will be near average in the north, significantly higher in the south, but it won't be quite as hot as yesterday. The afternoon will bring little change, although the far southeast may catch an isolated shower. It'll stay mainly dry and clear overnight, although cloudier over northern Scotland and the southwest of Ireland, with temperatures widely above average. And tomorrow looks mostly fine.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Quick look at some of the morning's other stories, and a woman and a baby have been killed in a boat accident near the Statue of Liberty in New York. 12 more people were rescued in the incident on Saturday night. The operator of a boat has been charged with reckless endangerment. The emission of volcanic ash from Mount Etna has led to the suspension of flights at Catania Airport in Italy. Flights were diverted and some tourists have been stranded at the airport. Meanwhile, a Roman shipwreck has been discovered around 3 miles off the coast of Sicily. Italy's heritage police say they explored the vessel with the help of scuba divers and underwater cameras, finding hundreds of items which may have been used to transport wine, olive oil and fish sauce. The Dukes of Hazzard star Ben Jones has died after suffering a heart attack at the age of 84. The American actor was best known for playing Cooter Davenport in the series, which ran from 1979 to 1985. After the show, he served for 4 years as a Democratic congressman. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to early childhood expert Jamie Barnes about toilet training children before the school year begins. That's coming up very shortly.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Anybody else?
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Were you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Sky News, get the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'll take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Let's just bring you a little bit more on the breaking news we brought you a short time ago about the leaders of UEFA, AFC and CONCACAF, the footballing groups, basically criticising Gianni Infantino, the boss of FIFA, over his plans to sell stakes in the World Cup, but essentially how he conducted himself through that process as well. Obviously, that was a plan that he did withdraw after all the criticism against it. These groups have talked about Infantino placing himself above the collective with that proposal to sell off stakes in the World Cup. They said he didn't acknowledge at all that the proposal itself was inherently wrong during that process, and they've called for a fully independent third-party review of the World Cup stake sale proposal. You can see that letter there. I mean, it's a long letter, so I can't go through all of it, but it does end by saying there is silence where there should be accountability, distance where there should be openness. These are not the qualities that football deserves in its leadership. That is why we've taken this stance, not lightly and not alone, but together and out of duty to the game we serve. Football's strength has always been its unity. We call for that unity to be honoured now, for leadership that serves football, not seeks to command it. So an open letter being put out there by those footballing bodies against Gianni Infantino's plan, now withdrawn, to sell stakes in the World Cup. Plenty more on that, no doubt, through the day. But in the meantime, let's turn our attention to kids, because it's summer holidays, and as many parents will be acutely aware of right now, of course. But while new research reveals that 1 in 4 children are estimated to start school without being fully toilet trained, we're going to talk about that. The government has launched a new campaign to support parents whose children can't yet use the toilet on their own. So let's bring in Jamie Barnes now, who's an early years expert. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in. So give us an idea of how common it is for children to start school not being properly potty trained.
Well, as you said, 1 in 4 children arriving at reception not toilet trained, which means it's putting a lot of pressure on, you know, the schools, but actually the children themselves. And we want children to arrive at school ready, feeling confident, and not have any additional pressures as well. And the research has shown that parents are feeling worried and anxious about toilet training. They're not sure what to do if it's not going right. And that's why this campaign is so important, because we want to empower parents. We want to empower children to start reception feeling ready, feeling confident, and just making progress when it comes to toilet training.
And there are lots of different reasons why there might be delayed toilet training, mightn't there? There are various issues. There might be hidden disabilities, there might be communication issues. Some kids just take longer than others, don't they? So it's not necessarily parents' fault at not starting early enough.
No, not at all. And we don't want to put any blame on parents. You know, it's actually about what we can do to empower you and to support you and your child. And actually, there are so many different factors. We've got parents that are working full-time at the moment, and increasingly so, and typically both parents. So managing that, managing, you know, your children and your home life, all those things that come together, as well as children with additional needs and might have disability as well. And you have to look at each child as an individual and support them in the right way for them. And that's going to look different for every family and for every child.
I want to get some of your tips in a moment. But first, we've got a little bit of a clip of the government programme. Let's have a quick look at that and then we'll talk tips in a moment.
Now, you might be wondering why we're sat in primary school toilets. If you've got a child starting school this September, thinking about whether they can use the toilet on their own might be something you worry about. As a mum who's been through it a few times, I know the feeling.
Every year we see children start school not fully toilet trained. But the good news is, if they're not quite there yet, there's still time to make progress before school starts.
So Georgia, why does using the toilet on their own matter, and what are some of the challenges children might face at school?
Starting school is a really big transition, with new routines, new faces and new experiences.
That is so true.
Being able to go to the toilet on their own is more than just going for a wee. It's about knowing when they need to go, asking for help, managing clothes, wiping, flushing and washing their hands.
There's definitely a lot for them to think about.
So that's part of the government's push to make people aware. So if people are watching and this is something that they're struggling with, what tips have you got?
Tips, I've got lots of them. Been supporting children with toilet training for so many years now, countless children, and actually the government on the Best Start for Life website have got 5 simple tips to support parents. That first tip is actually to just talk to your child about what's happening and what's going on and involving children with it. It's so important so they have an understanding, and it's not out of their control then. They can be part of the whole process. I always think bring that element of fun into things as well, and actually role-playing it out with your children. You know what your child likes. They might be into dinosaurs, dolls, whatever it is, but actually making it a bit fun and role-playing it through, because children learn through play. And so we want to make this a relaxed experience for them. And actually it can be a really nice bonding moment for parents with their children, supporting them through this whole process. The second tip would be that if your child is in nappies or pull-ups during the day, to remove these, because actually without them a child is able to understand if they are wet or dry much easier than if they're wearing them. So that would be the next tip. And then to help your child to use the toilet regularly, giving them as many opportunities to be successful. And so we can praise them as much as possible, taking them to the toilet. I know I have a 4-year-old myself who's starting reception, so I know exactly what parents are going through at the minute. But often, you'll ask children, do you need the toilet? And they'll say no, because they're so engrossed in what they're doing, they don't want to be taken away from it. So actually saying, let's go to the toilet now, and taking them with you and supporting them in that way.
Jamie, really good tips. I remember that well. There are always accidents. We just have to roll with it. Jamie, thanks very much indeed. We really appreciate it. Stay with us for all the top stories.